Hello everyone. Right then, now I've got YouTube and XSplit actually communicating and talking to each other. Goodness gracious me, these things occasionally happen. Hopefully, I can talk to you all and you can all see me. He says, hopefully. Hello! How's it going? Howdy. First things first. I'm fairly sure it's Saturday the 7th. Sunday the 7th. So, gonna need to quickly do some changing around on that one. I have got Iron Brew. I've got dog biscuits there as well, which is the important thing according to the fluffy research assistant. I've got a model aeroplane box showing up there, which is slightly battered at the back, but is visible. And let's hope that's okay. I hope you can all hear me. I hope all is well. And we are now live. So let's see. I'm going to change it all to live chat. I've got chat up on this screen, and I've got the lovely... Well, when I say lovely, I mean the joyous thing that is YouTube on that screen. So, hello John Shea, hello Rick Basava, hello Kalman Gasberg, hello Peter Dawson, hello Steve Winnish. Hey, can't there be at least one Festivus book? Why are they all Xmas books? Because, don't take this the wrong way, but Christmas, people are more likely to buy books for Christmas as presents than they are to buy for a Festivus. So I've gone with a Christmas list. Principally because hopefully people will search it and find it. Hello, John Barrow, and these are some pretty cool books, and it's literally a pile of stuff, and it's some of the ones I've had waiting for a while to get their book reviews done, and I've been trying to do the book reviews in order of the books coming into me, and something's been a little bit delayed of that, so I've decided to go this way and just go for them. I'll still do individual reviews on these books, but that can take that can be delayed a bit if I've done a good review of these books now. Good evening, Awazaski. Good evening, Colin Cameron. Good evening, Graham Hollander. If you're hungry and all you get is a topping, then you eat it. Is someone getting a Hawaiian pizza? Jonathan Burrow. Really? Farmhouse. Farmhouse is the way to go. Hello, off license. I want a naval themed pizza. Any ideas? You want a naval themed pizza? Well, you've got to have tuna because of the amount of ships that have been called tuna cans on occasion. Probably mushrooms because let's be honest, quite a lot of the people tend to refer to various weapon systems as mushroom farms, especially modern naval missile systems like the Sea Scepter system. That tends to be called a mushroom farm. And what else? Can't go for bacon. That reason would get me thrown off air by YouTube permanently. And also, I can't do barbecue sauce because that would also get me chucked off air permanently. Basically, I'm going to have to limit it to tuna and mushroom because the other 4 ingredients I can think of, if I actually said them out loud, would get me chucked off YouTube permanently. In fact, pretty much a lot of them would get me chucked off live. Oh, I'm trying to think of things. I have to confess, sour cream, garlic. Really? Yeah, definitely find a vampire going. Hello, off license. Hello, Paul Beswick. Hello, Night 6831. Can't we stay? I can't stay until the end of Bruships tonight due to Formula One at 11:35 tonight. Enjoy not a Formula One. Graham, if a fluffy research assistant would love haggis. I can testify he does like haggis. I can also testify that for the reasons you state in the chat, he is never getting haggis. Again. Hello, Bishram. Enjoy the Marriott Hotel. Hello, Spindrift. Hello, Graham Honda. Hello. Ooh, Tanifelogia. Hello. Hello, Sean V. Hello, DG40. Let's see if I can. I've called up with saying hello to people. Hello, Seneca Nero. Hello, hello, Shumi. Hello, Felix B. Hello, I haven't seen you in a while. Tasha 2 for Shell. Hello, Chris Martin. Hello, DH89. Hello, Animal 16365. Hello, and Butterbeer and Choco Bunny. Hello. I don't think I've seen them before. So hello, Butterbeer and Choco. Morning or evening by Alex? Oh, it's going to be evening by me. World 2 Submarine History of Haiku. Hello. And rocking those dual monitors. Yes, I am rocking dual monitors at the moment. Thanks to laptop and screen. Hopefully, once I get a tower functioning, then I will have 2 big screens, and laptop will be the backup computer. I was asking also if you want books for Christmas, now's the time to order and then wait for shipping. Pretty much. And Chris Martin, most of my Xmas list is books. Yep. Alpha License, any good cruiser books coming out? Not really that I've been sent yet. Animal 635, sardines. Yes, sardine cans. You can get that, but it also works with tuna. Hello, Ronski's Binocular Supplier. Hello. Hello, George Newman. Hello, Alfred B228. And hello, everyone. I hope you're having fun. So, right. So, what do we got coming up? Well, we've got a whole load of books, and as you'll notice, the links and the books are down below so that you can find them easily. They're not going to be linked in as things that I have to go and search for. So the idea I did that and put the list down there was because I thought if I have to go hunting for the books, then that takes time, and then I'm doing Amazon links and all sorts of things there, or I have to have a billion tabs open, which I don't like having a billion tabs open. So this way, I can start off with books, and I've just got 3 piles. And I've got all the books, which are listed down below, and they're mixed up in these 3 piles. So I could grab from any of the piles, and it won't be in the order they're listed down below. Okay? I apologize for that now, but I thought it pretty cool. And I'm starting off with Roman Conquest Britain by Simon Elliott. Now, this is a absolutely fantabulous book. And I will stand up, I put my hand up here and say, to start off with, Simon is a pal. We have both been taught by Professor Andrew Lambert. We have both done the Mysteries of the Deep series for Discovery. We have done all sorts of things together, and I have mentioned this book before because it is a very good book. And if you're interested in Roman history, though, this is an excellent book to get. If you're interested just generally in history and you'd like a book which will give you an introduction to the Roman world, this is an excellent book to get because it introduces you to everything. Hello, Stafford Thompson. Hello, Vice Admiral Nelson. And hello, Derp Squad. This is a very, very cool book. And let me just give you an example. The Boadiceian Revolt. The blood-soaked rebellion of Boudica is arguably the most famous event in the story of Roman occupation of Britain. It almost ended the Roman presence in the islands here and saw legionaries and auxiliaries fighting in the most extreme conditions. The feat would have meant the destruction of 4 whole legions, on a scale even larger than the loss of Varus's 3 legions in the Teutoburg forest, in Germany AD 9. The context behind this dramatic event was the earlier death of the Iceni king Prastagus, Boudicca's husband. A Roman client king, in his will he left his kingdom to his 2 daughters and also to Nero. As detailed above, ruling clients of the Romans usually left their kingdom entirely to the Romans after their deaths, and the emperor reacted predictably when he heard the news of Prastagus' unusual arrangement. The dead king's will was annulled, and the territory of the Iceni quickly folded into the expanding province of Britannia. It is now that Boudicca enters the history, with Dio describing her appearance as very much the warrior queen. She was very tall and stern. Her look was penetrating, her voice harsh. A mass of auburn hair fell to her hips, and around her neck was a heavy golden torque. She wore a patterned cloak with a thick cape over it, fastened with a brooch. Boudicca protested against the treatment of her kingdom. Tacitus says the Roman response was brutal and extreme. He details Iceni territory was pillaged by centurions, the dead king's household ransacked by slaves. Boudicca lashed and her 2 daughters raped. It's worth noting here that Dio gives a completely different and far more mundane reason for Boudicca leading a revolt. He's saying an excuse for the revolt was found in the confiscation of the sums of money that Claudius had given to the foremost Britons. But these sums, as Decianus Cadus, the precursor of the island, maintained, would be paid back. This was one reason for the uprising. Another was found in the fact that Seneca, a leading statesman of Rome, in the hope of receiving a good rate of interest, had lent to the islanders 40 million sesterces that they did not want, and had afterwards called in this loan all at once, and had resorted to severe measures in exacting it. Whatever the cause, the result was incendiary and extreme. Tacitus has Boudicca addressing her people, setting them on course for savage rebellion. The queen saying, "It is not as a woman descended from noble ancestry, but as one of the people that I am avenging lost freedom, my scourged body, the outraged chastity of my daughters. This is a woman's resolve. As for men, they may live and be slaves." Dio also has the queen exhort the masses to revolt, grasping a spear and saying, "Have we not been robbed entirely of our most of our possessions, and those greatest, while for those who remain we pay taxes? Besides pasturing and tilling for them all of our other possessions, do we not pay a yearly tribute for our very bodies? How much better it would be to have been sold to masters once for all than, possessing empty titles of freedom, to have to ransom ourselves every year. How much better to have been slain and to have perished than to go about with a tax on our heads. Yet why do I mention death? For even dying is not free of cost with them. Nay, you know what fees we deposit even for our dead. Among the rest of mankind, death fees even those who are in slavery to others. Yet only in the case of Romans do the very dead remain alive for their profit. Why is it that none of us has any money? How indeed could we, or where would we get it? We are stripped and despoiled like a murderer's victims, and why should the Romans be expected to display moderation as time goes on, when they have behaved towards us in this fashion at the very outset, when all men show consideration even for the beasts that they have newly captured?" It's a cool book. It is a very cool book, and it's a very good book, and the link is down below. Nice job. Seneca, is Drain the Ocean on Disney Plus any good? It's a fairly good program. Episode. Wait, we're doing a Bruships where we actually talk about books? I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this diversion from all our well-founded channel tradition. I'll be answering questions as well, but I will be talking about books. Dr. Sorry, I've been away for a long time. Can you recommend any good books about the PRC overseas fishing fleet and how it's affecting naval strategy? Nope. Because they haven't been written yet. No good books have been written yet that I've read. I've read one of the books that's out. There's about 3. 2 are about £300 each, and they're brand new. So that tells you how many are being printed. The third one has a chapter about it, and the chapter is in an edited book. The edited book is not as expensive, but it's still not cheap. It's about 50 quid. And no, I was not impressed by that chapter at all. Which is a really shame, because I was impressed by the rest of the chapters in the book. So if I ever review that book, I will talk about it or talk about them all, but I just won't mention that chapter because that chapter I'm really not impressed with. Mainly because it seems to be putting the blame for it on everyone else, not the people doing it. And I don't agree with a victim blaming approach. I do agree that nations need to stand up for themselves, and I do agree that you need to be strong enough to do it. But I don't agree that it's your fault if you are attacked by someone. John Barron, I have Shattered Sword, a lot of World War II ships, and all of yours. Thank you. I wanted to ask Thursday, how does Taranto go if Illustrious was switched for alt dimension Illustrious that got the Victorious rebuild with Sea Furies and Wyverns replacing full muzzle Silverfish? Well, that's a big what if. You're saying if we get an Illustrious with Victorious rebuild that's armed with Sea Furies and Wyverns, probably painful. I'm not sure. Let's see. Let's be honest. The Wyvern is a far faster aircraft than a Swordfish, so I would say probably it wouldn't be good for the Italians. Also, nicest way they might just carry on striking because honestly, those aircraft could outpace anything the Italians could put up at the time. Basically, if you take an aircraft which is from a decade in the future, it's going to outpace anything that's available for the Italians at that point. Georgine, connection dropping out too much. We'll catch this one later. Bye, Dr. C. Sorry to hear that. Vidron, if Boudicca had won, how would that have changed history? Good idea for a Patreon video? Very good idea for a Patreon video. Because that's a massive question. That's starting... If Boudicca wins, the question is, does Rome accept it, or do they come back again? And traditionally, Rome would come back again. But they would have to come back with a lot if she wins. Jeff Thompson, I would agree with that. Hello, Thomas Hobuff. Greetings from Austria. How's Austria? That's good. At Sean Matt. Let's see. At Derb Squad. Right, so next book. This one. This is a cool one. The Battle of Quiron Bay, 1759. I know I have done a book review, a book or two to review on this, and I know it's a gorgeous book, but it's so worth it for a Christmas buy. If you are interested in Age of Sail history, this book is fantastic. Nicholas Tracy does an amazing job in this book, and it's such a cool history. And we talk about Trafalgar often as this really special thing. It's kind of like when we're talking about Dreadnought as this really special thing. But Quiberon Bay is just as special, just as fantastic. And Hawke, well, he's Nelson's hero, and it's good reading a book which is unashamedly about presenting him as such. According to a later account by William Locker, who was to serve under him during the 759 campaign as a lieutenant in the Sapphire frigate, Admiral Hawke was the founder of the more gentlemanly spirit, which has since been gradually gaining ground in the Navy. At the period when we first went to sea, a man of war was characterized by all the coarseness so graphically described in the novels of Smollett. His gentlemanly deportment and propriety of conversation effected a salutary improvement among the officers. Locker, in turn, was to be one of Horatio Nelson's patrons, and to pass on to him Hawke's ruthless determination as well as his civility. The idea that a gentleman can be both a polite and nice person to those he cares and meets with, but also can be utterly ruthless to those he fights. Same is true for a lady. In fact, in my experience, never ever pick a fight with someone who describes themselves as a lady. They'll be polite and kind right up until you cross them. Then they will cut you to the bone without even flinching. Born in 1705, probably in London, Edward Hawke had joined the Navy in 1720 with the help of his Yorkshire mother's brother, Colonel Martin Bolden, who was a Commissioner of Trade and Plantations. His father, Edward, was a barrister of Lincoln's Inn, but died in 1718. In 1725, the future admiral passed for lieutenant and served in North American and West Indian waters. He served as first lieutenant on the Kingston of 60 guns, the flagship of Commodore Sir Calhoun Ogle, who promoted him master and commander of the 10-gun Wolf on the 13th of April, 1733, and on the 20th of March, 1734, to captain of the frigate Flamborough of 24 guns, which established Hawke in post rank. 2 years later, he was married to Catherine Brooke, Colonel Bolden's 17-year-old niece, and was on half pay when in 1739 war broke out with Spain. For the next 3 years, he commanded an aged 50-gun ship in the West Indies, the Portland, accompanied by his wife, and in August 1743 he commanded a 70-gun Berwick in the Mediterranean. There on 11 February 1744, at the Battle of Toulon, he firmly established his reputation for moral and physical courage, and for skill at arms. The Battle of Toulon was remarkable for displaying all that was wrong with the early 18th century Navy, and with a tactical tradition that developed from the time of the Second Dutch War, with the use of the line of battle tactics to maximize the effectiveness of the broadside armament of warships. The problem with line tactics was that they were greatest value for a fleet standing on the defensive, and posed great difficulties for a fleet seeking to attack. The ship of the line is the only weapon system ever developed that cannot direct the weight of its fire along the line of advance of the weapon carrier. Any sort of engagement depended upon the admirals maneuvering their fleets so that they crossed the danger area where they could be fired upon, but could not return that fire. Once able to engage, the attacking admiral then had to deploy a crushing fire upon party enemy line by doubling it, or by cutting it. Doubling was the act of bringing up party enemy fleet into action from both sides. Cutting enemy line disorganized the enemy so that the ships astern of the cut would be forced out of formation. Bunching so that firing arcs were closed, or exposing their vulnerable sterns to fire. The official fighting instructions of the British fleet mandated that admirals were to form a close-hauled line of battle to windward, and to seek to overwhelm the enemy from the windward. And the consequences of ignoring the requirement would be severe. This is a good one. Vision, I do realise Devastation and Thunder were really special ships. Don't worry, I do realise. And maybe if I get around to recording the Long Patrol that video tomorrow, along with the Long Patrol for Tuesday, they might get a mention. But there's still no mention of Captain, because that just annoys me. There we go. There's the eyebrow. Sure, Matt, can I make Stafford a mod on Discord? I don't think anyone but me can make people mods on Discord. I'm not sure. I might make... I have been thinking about making Stafford a mod for a while, but that's not really the sort of thing to discuss on YouTube, and it's also... I do realise it takes up quite a time of mods, so I was going to ask if Stafford wanted to volunteer before I did it. So that's something we'll talk about later. Double Harris, what is your favourite topic about naval warfare? Ooh. Ship design, usually. Ship design is what I can talk about for hours, and the reasons why ships are designed the way they are. Chris One, downloaded your Travels book on Kindle. Just started the battles. Enjoying it. I'm glad. Yes, my book is now available on Kindle. I'm not sure what this means, but it's now available. It's available to be downloaded on Kindle. But I will say this. When I was writing it, I was writing it as a book you would be able to read and look at that way rather than on Kindle. So if it isn't as good on Kindle, I apologize. But I think it's still quite good on Kindle. Although I have to admit, I haven't read it myself on Kindle because, don't take this the wrong way, but I've read it so many times now. When I read my own book, I'm not sure if I'm reading it or remembering it. Oh, Jonathan, your thoughts on town class cruisers of World War II, IJN? I personally do quite like the idea. Honestly, me and the tone class cruisers already had a conversation during the lovely thing that was my review of the Japanese cruisers, the victims of the Kansai Kessen. And honestly, I can see why you like the idea, but I honestly think they muck up the cruiser for it. And I did go through and work and say how they could have made it better. And to be fair, I'm just not that keen on that idea of that use of things for I'm not that keen on, I have to admit, on those cruisers being used for that type of operation. I think if you're going to make a seaplane ship, make a seaplane ship. You can do them. You don't have to make a cruiser a seaplane ship. That's the thing. There's actual provisions in the treaty for you to make ships which are seaplane carriers. And I would have made special seaplane carriers, and I would have made cruisers. I wouldn't have made the two ships, one ship, because you run into the same problems you run into with a battle carrier, i.e. that's the carrier battleship concept. You've taken your cruiser and you've added a very explosive, very dangerous stern to it, which is very likely to be fired on, and you've given yourself poor firing arcs to boot. It's basically, if you're looking at that, as your solution, you're already in a problem which you should have fixed earlier. Colin Cameron, if the UK had known the time of the Italian Declaration War, would it have been forced and made to do a surprise Copenhagen and take out the fleet anchor? Yes. This is the Royal Navy you're talking about. Of course, if they had the opportunity to do a Copenhagen, they would have done a Copenhagen. The only reason they don't manage to do a Copenhagen on Wilhelmshaven is because the RAF say they're going to do it, and they do it late. Nice, what was that screeching noise? I have no idea. I do not understand it at all. On that one. Knights of Karen, when did the UK realise they were caught in shortism, and why haven't the US realised they're caught in it? Probably you're talking about the time that Fisher gets to being on the Lords of the Admiralty as Third Sea Lord. Hmm. Hmm. So, like, tone class are better than a cruiser carrier, but doesn't make it good. Honestly, I might actually prefer a cruiser carrier. The thing is, I think the Saratogas do quite a good job, but they're aircraft carriers which have 8-inch guns. They're not supposed to be cruisers. They're just meant to protect themselves from cruisers. And I still prefer not to have the 8-inch guns. I'd like to have a dual-purpose 6-inch gun mount. That would be useful. Hmm. I have no idea who's turning up, but hey ho. Hello, Graham Handler. Neil Oliver, are we talking about? I once met him at a conference. He was actually quite nice at the conference. But I have to say, I stay away from most of these things. Honestly, I wouldn't get on with half my colleagues if I asked them about what they do in their personal lives. In fact, I prefer not to know what they go on in their personal lives. Honestly, this is going to sound terrible, but I'm one of those colleagues on it that if you're my friend as well as a colleague, then I don't. Then I'm, quite. I like hearing about your personal life and chatting with you and all that stuff. If you're just a colleague, as far as I'm concerned, you have a work life, and what happens after the hours I don't see you in work, I don't care about. It really ain't my business. It ain't your business what I get up to. Have fun. 9687, where can I find a Bill Trumps rating system? Not out yet. You can find several Bill Trumps episodes about it, but you cannot find a Bill Trumps rating system. So, we have the first U-boat flotilla. Now, this is by Lawrence Patterson, and this is the sort of book which, if you love submarines, you'll really, really love. If you don't love submarines, you're going to find this a bit hard. And I have to admit, I like submarines, but even I found this book occasionally a little bit sub. Because this is going to sound strange. I look at most of these things as a debate, as something where the submarines and the tactics are developing and the surface ships are developing. And I found this very orientated around the submarines and not really thinking about what was happening on the other side. But it has... The reason I still like this book, and I'm going to recommend it, is because it's full of so much information and so much rich content about the submarines that I almost think the author needs to go back and write another book about the other side, because the way this information is structured in here, how do I put it? It's a really fantastic account of one side of the argument, and it's worth reading for that reason. And it's worth understanding for that reason. But I have this feeling that Lawrence Peterson could go away and write the other side of the argument, and I have a feeling then I would be able to recommend, like I do with John Jordan and with Andrew Boyd, a 2-book set and go, you have to buy this pair. Because at the moment, I feel like I've got one half of the pair. And I'll give you an example. 10th of May. Further transfers had taken place from Kiel. The short-lived tenure of U8 was over, and she and U20 were posted at the strength of the training establishments in Danzig, departing Kiel on 10th of May. A day of great significance to Germany and to her enemy, England. Earlier that morning, the forces of the Third Reich had begun the conquest of Western Europe, while in Britain, Winston Churchill entered Downing Street as Prime Minister of a newly formed national government. In Holland, German armoured forces of Field Marshal Feder von Bock's Army Group B, supported by intense Luftwaffe bombing and paratrooper Fallschirmjäger landings, ripped through thinly held defensive lines. The Wehrmacht delivering a stunning blows to the Low Countries, using their astounding blitzkrieg to devastate opponents still mired in defensive ways of thinking not much changed for 30 years. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt's Army Group A poured into the impassable woods of the Ardennes to outflank a bewildered Allied front line. Eckermann noted that the transfers of U-8 and U-20 into wartime, writing underneath the somewhat understated words, fighting in Holland and Belgium. The effect of Germany's assault on the Low Countries during May was also felt in Norway's grim struggle against the Wehrmacht. While the perilous position that the Allied forces in Holland and Belgium found themselves in, Norway became a drain on what was fast becoming endangered resources of Allied men and material. The decision was made to evacuate Norway despite Allied troops finally wresting control of Narvik from General Dieter's mountain troops, otherwise known as the Gebirgsjäger. It's worth a read. Hannah. He's not. He's not turned up yet. Leave it be until if someone turns up, then say something. Then go. If not, don't. You might enjoy this evening, and I doubt Neil Oliver would turn up. I'm presuming he's got something better to do on his Sunday night, or rather something. I think he has a wife and small children. Whereas I have all of you. And frankly, I consider that quite nice. And thank you, Thomas Hobart. Sure, don't forget the torpedoes extractor thing as well, which I'm sure Thunder have a ship with massive aviation gas tanks on back. No, let's just no. Let's put it this way. My solid view is this. If I have a ship that's supposed to be within gun firing range of enemy ships, which by definition any 1920s, 30s, or World War II cruiser is going to be, I do not want to have a flat deck with aviation fuel on it. Shomak, I meant the hybrid cruiser carrier idea with the flight deck on the back and the guns on the front, because why do you want to do one thing well when you can do all the things badly? Peter Dawson. Carrier cruisers, HMS Full Noodle. No, Formidable Fortune was a battle carrier, not a cruiser carrier. And she hadn't made any concession. Any concession at all to the idea of needing actual battleship guns to do this role. Anok, Lexington was sunk with 8-inch guns. Saratoga had them replaced with 5-inch 38s. Yeah. Danny Burka, when a destroyer launches the torpedoes, does it have to move the handrails from the deck, or do the torpedoes go at the top? Depends on the height of the launcher, but normally they do as part of their going to action stations, remove the drop down the handrails. Colin Cameron, did you set the Amazon links with affiliate links? Yes, I did. Because when I didn't once before, I got told off. Not only by the very nice people in the chat, but also by family members and friends who I didn't actually even realize watched the videos told me off. So which, if you're watching, Lady A, thank you. I do remember. Vision, what type of ship is a pizza? Calzone. It's obvious. If a ship was a pizza, it's a calzone. Right then. Ooh, I've done Age of Sail. I've done that. Ooh, I'm going to do this. Right then. King John and Henry III, England's Lost Civil War, by John Paul Davis. Now, this was one of those books which I honestly, when I got sent by Pen and Sword, and most new books today have been sent to me by Pen and Sword, I was sort of going, okay, this is either going to be good or bad. It's going to be nothing in between. And honestly, it's good. It is good. And it has a chapter in here, which I'm hunting down, called God Helps the Marshal. And I liked this chapter especially. It was recorded in Wigan Annals that a series of mock suns lit up the sky on the 26th of April 1217. The people of Worcester had been unaware at the time that the phenomenon had occurred 4 days after Louis's return to England. His landing celebrated with the torching of Sandwich. Aided by a mere 120 knights, of far greater consequence was the transportation of a trebuchet. He had also made it back in time for the expiry of the truce. Despite being in possession of arguably the greatest marvels so far invented in siege warfare, familiar frustrations would again be encountered before the sturdy walls of Dover Castle. On leaving Kent, the prince headed towards Winchester and joined with the Earl of Winchester, share the Quincy at the siege of Farnham Castle, which the Royalists had taken around mid-March. Learning that Montserrat was under attack from Ranulph, who had been recently postponed his Crusader plans at Guala's request, and William de Fers, the Earl of Derby, on the capturing of the Outer Bailey of Farnham, Louis returned swiftly to Winchester. After reconquering Winchester in less than a week, he divided his forces to continue the siege of Dover and raise the Royalist siege of Montserrat. Word of Louis's plans soon reached Leicestershire. Understanding that Louis was heading north, the Royalist forces, seemingly under the impression that they were being pursued by the entire might of the enemy, vacated Montserrat and for a brief time took refuge in Nottingham. With Montserrat relieved, the prince continued east to Lincoln in a bid to complete a further ongoing siege. As in Dover, a royal loyalist had held the castle. On this occasion, no officer of high status, but a sheriff named Nicola de Hay, another female of the Magna Carta era, who would soon become something of a celebrated hero in her own right. On learning firsthand of Louis's plans, more specifically that the Dauphin had split his force in two, Marshal immediately plotted a counterstrike. On the 12th of May, the same day Louis resumed siege of Dover, the region had been celebrating Pentecost with the legate in Northampton, when another excommunication sentence was passed against the French invader. No sooner were celebrations over, the legate and the king joined Ranulph in Nottingham. The royal forces gathered in Newark, 17th to 18th of May, their numbers supplemented by conscripting the garrisons of various castles, following which Marshal led them to Lincoln via Tuskegee and Stowe to the north. By choosing a route that would allow them to avoid the need to enter the city uphill, Marshal had delivered part one of his masterstroke. His numerically inferior forces numbered only 400 knights and 300 crossbowmen, compared to the 600 knights and 1,000 foot soldiers within the town besieging the castle. Yet Marshal's clever choice of route had brought them to the outskirts of the city almost unobserved. After resting on the night of the 19th of May, they arrived in Lincoln and prepared to relieve Nicholas' garrison. The Roches. Here was instrumental in deliverance of the key strategies. Having learned from a rendezvous with De Hay that the town's blocked western gate, way to the north of the castle, was potentially accessible. Once Marshal had set up communications to the castle as Chester pummeled the north gate, crossbowmen, under the guidance of Fawkes de Bunt, joined the garrison via the west gate. They then ventured from the east gate into the street and effected diversion that allowed Chester to concentrate on the poorly defended north gate. The clashes that followed quickly spread through the streets and steep lanes that connected the upper and lower town. The worst of the conflicts occurred under the shadow of the cathedral's mighty towers. It was here a spear through his visor severely wounded the French Count of Perche. Despite managing 3 hard blows against Marshal's helmet, the emergence of the forces led by Chester in the lower town signaled to the French that they had faced defeat. Coupled with the Henrician forces descending the hill and another wave led by Alan and Thomas Bassett closing in from behind, the rebels' chance of achieving a counterstrike uphill became all but impossible. Disarray among the French forces had been evident from the very beginning. So concerned had the Marshal of France and Count of Perche become, the commands of the Earls of Winchester and Robert Fitzwaller to take the fight outside the city walls were swiftly declined. Any possibility of continuing the siege of the castle within the city walls until reinforcements arrived was also out of the question. Left with no alternative, the rebel forces fled the city in large numbers. The so-called Fair of Lincoln provided another noteworthy moment in the direction of war. A royal victory, it had proven remarkably bloodless. Some reports placed the royalist casualties at only 3. Less true have been of the city itself. Not content with the spoils of the French nobles and rebel barons, the victorious English went on the rampage. The canons of the cathedral chapter, being deemed excommunicate due to their assisting Louis, were plundered. Following this, the sacking of the town and churches prompted many women and children to flee. Similar to the situation in the fallout of the fire of Southwark, the rash behaviour of the evacuees in overcrowding their rowing boats on reaching the river sadly led to mass drowning. Incidentally, such things were noted to have occurred after the Marshal departed from the city. While he was in the city, they were under control. The victory secure, a jubilant Marshal rode swiftly for Nottingham to see the legate. Guala again publicly excommunicated Louis, and further dubbed the onslaught of the crusade by offering an indulgence to Henry's soldiers. Typically, further rewards were offered, including the earldom of Lincoln to Ranulph, and control the city to Longsbury. Ranulph was also awarded Montserrat, which he immediately razed to the ground on completing of the siege. On the rebel side, any lucky enough to avoid decapitation in the battle or taken prisoner fled for the capital. Among those were Fitzwaller, De Quincey, and several of the Northerners. It's a very cool book, and one of the most interesting characters from history, in British history, is Marshall. Is the Marshall. And this book covers a lot of what he gets involved in. Jamara, do you have a favorite German warship? Honestly, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for them. They are, as I said, it's a favourite thing, and it's just they're just the two I tend to like. I tend to think them better than Tirpitz and Bismarck myself. I think they were a far better design, and I think for what they're worth, the Germans could have really churned them out in numbers because they're never going to be able to match the British in capability. So you either have to go for fast and numbers, and still not have the numbers the British will mount, but the capable, respectable numbers, or go for something massive. And the thing is, you're never going to out-massive the British because whatever you produce, as happened at the Battle of the River Plate, the British you'll turn up with one big ship and go, yes, I rule the seas! And the British will turn up with 4 ships, or 3 ships, which are 70% of you, and go, but you don't rule these seas, do you now? Oh no, Expenders. Langston still had 4 8-inch twin turrets when sunk. I was asking, a hybrid of AA cruiser and seaplane tender? Recon plus fleet AA battery? Sounds nice. Potentially that could work, but you could build a seaplane tender which had all those capabilities quite easily. Under the same clause which, let's sort of say, the same article I tend to cite as allowing the Royal Navy to have produced a lot of sloops in the interwar period could have allowed you to produce a seaplane carrier. Colin Cameron. So I've jumped and bought a couple of books. The Total Germany book is reduced. It is a very good book, the Total Germany book, and it is worth getting. And as such, I will actually do a quick read of it now. So, Total Germany. This is David Ragg. Again, I think I have done a book or two to review on this. And it's a very, very cool book. It's all about, well, as it says, the Royal Navy's war against Axis powers, 1939 to 1945. And it's a great overview book. Some books are good books. For example, if we're talking about this Quiberon Bay, this goes into the Battle of Quiberon Bay in huge detail. But if I was going to be talking about the whole period, I'd want to read this book, which is Command of the Ocean. But that's been out for ages, and if you don't know about this book, then you really should. But it's a great book. So that's why it's not listed today. But Total Germany is the overview book of World War II. If you want to find out what the Royal Navy is doing, this doesn't cover everything. Some things are literally just quick mentions because it's writing about 6 years of war in 274 pages. And that's including the index. But it has some cool pictures. It has some interesting stuff in there. And it has things like this. Let's see. The Royal Navy had tried to stop Japan reinforcing its troops in Siam and Malaya by sending the new battleship Prince of Wales and the elderly battlecruiser Repulse. These ships had been meant to operate in conjunction with the new aircraft carrier Indomitable. I'm never quite sure about this. I have to admit, we get into this in our discussion in the 4C special we've got coming up with, which Bruships are doing at the moment and recording. I don't see Indomitable as mentioned. I see Ark Royal mentioned in 1940, 1941, when she's still around, as Force H is supposed to be the colonel of the force sent to the Far East. And I see Illustrious and Formidable mentioned. Indomitable is working up. Indomitable doesn't seem to be mentioned. There's a presumption that she's going to go there, and there is a logic to her going there. And I know there is discussions of her going to the Indian Ocean for training. Because the Indian Ocean is a good place for training. But I don't think that necessarily means she's supposed to be there with Force Z. But she had run aground and was not available, leaving them with just 4 destroyers for protection. Worse, the commander of the small squadron, Rear Admiral Tom Phillips. Let's see. Let's see. Well, by my count, and this is going to sound strange, he's not a rear admiral in 1941. So this is one of the other things. Tom Phillips is not a rear admiral. Tom Phillips was promoted to, well, let's see. He became a rear admiral in 1939. Then he was deputy chief of naval staff and then vice chief of naval staff. And then he became a vice admiral in February 1940. And then he's sent to the Far East as commander-in-chief of the China Station. So he's at the very least a vice admiral, potentially an admiral. Not a rear admiral. But I still do love this book. I'm just saying it's an excellent book to get for Christmas. But Rag set himself a massive task to cover 6 years of war. So use it as an overview book, enjoy it as an overview book, enjoy it as a big discussion book. But there are some things which have slipped through. And honestly, this is going to sound terrible, but I like him for that, because the thing about Rag is he produces so many books of such high quality that sometimes when there's just a teeny error in them, it's good because it reminds us he's human as well, and that makes what he does even more amazing. And I do like this book. Although, Tom Phillips is not a rear admiral when he dies. He's not. Seneca Nero, how would a Copenhagening of Wilhelmshaven change World War One? Under that circumstance, you're basically saying Fisher's brought back early, mobilizes the fleet rapidly, and instead of the King George V flotilla turning up to see the fleet, the whole Royal Navy turns up to see the Germans and wipes them out. Let's put it this way. If you have no German battle fleet, the odds are there's an amphibious operation to try and break the stalemate of the Western Front. That's what Fisher wanted. That's what most of the Navy would have done, and honestly, that could have caused a lot of problems for the Germans. Rosensky Binocular Supply, building a seaplane carrier or a forward aviation support ship? Oh, always a forward aviation support ship. Let's see. No, and Nishan 67. No. I will answer that one. I will say no, diversity wasn't a factor in the Bonhomme Richard. No. In fact, perhaps diversity might have helped them a bit. And when I say diversity in the Bonhomme Richard fire, you're probably thinking about ethnic things, and those don't have a factor. What matters is training, and what matters is the team coming together. And the Bonhomme Richard fire, as we've covered in fairly fully in Bilge Pumps, seems to be one of those scenarios where everyone just mucks up, because everyone, and there are a lot of officers involved, I really don't seem mentally prepared for what they're dealing with. But go read the report, make your own assessment. That's what I suggest people do. That's why there's a link to it in the Bilge Pumps discussion. John Shea, how does someone have the endurance and mindset to write 6 years of war for a book? For a book in 274 pages, that is... Again, this is freaking amazing. Getting 6 years of war into a book, 274 pages long, and it's good. Brent Paulus, well, 4C was at Singapore. So if they have a carrier, they take moderate damage. What do the Brits do next? Probably Abda command forms up based on that fleet. Because let's be honest, the ABDA command would form up based on that fleet. But we get into all this in the Bill Trump special that's coming. Admiral Apparent, any good books you know of about the Spanish Navy? Any period, not too particular. I've got a book coming to me. When it gets here, it's supposed to be good, but I haven't read it yet. So it will probably appear in Bruships in about 2 to 3 weeks' time. I will make a recommendation as to its quality then. But that's what I'll limit myself to. Alfred B228. What sort of effect could 1944 anti-aircraft weapons and associated systems have made if all sides had them in 1939? Oh, good lord. If all sides had 1944 AA weapons and radars, etc. in 1939, you probably have problems. Especially, and this is going to sound strange, the starting fleets, the Royal Navy's far more numerous than the Germans and the Italians in 1939. It's far more numerous than anyone else. So if you've got Britain starting in 1939, the stuff it has in 1944, you are probably cutting down losses in the Mediterranean for starters. Especially if they're against the same aircraft. You're probably cutting down losses in Norway. You probably have things like, well, the Tribal class destroyers probably have radars, and they have probably 4 double 4.5-inch guns. So they probably look something akin to, I don't know, a battle class with those sort of turrets, or maybe they even have the full daring style turrets if they've got them done. And if they've got 4 of them, then that gives them a huge AA power, but also gives them a huge capability in terms of anti-ship engagement. So, yeah, it can make a big problem. And the radar especially be very, very useful. Knight 681, is USS Enterprise CVN-65 just another victim of the problem that the RF Raytheon Centrals and HMS Bristol fell to? Victims, only small number, meant they were very costly to run. Yep. But also there's the fact that she had 8 reactors. 8 reactors doesn't make anyone have a easy life to run. Schumacher, with the German Navy out of the picture, either the Germans don't join or they get the Dardanelles campaign that might rival Pacific War battles in terms of a large ship presence. That's interesting. Potentially. Rosenti's binocular supplies. If you're looking for any good books about the Dutch and the Navy's Indian war period, you basically want to start off with Warships After Washington and Warships After London, which are the Jordan books. There is a book or two to review coming out this week, which is on them. So that's on Wednesday. And those are good books. Even 1939 Poland works out very differently if Luftwaffe runs into 1944-ish flak. Mm-hmm. Your opinion on British aircraft carriers design, development, service histories by David Hobbs. Popped up in recommendations after I bought the Germany book. It's a decent book. It's not as good as my PhD thesis, but that's not being turned into a book yet. So it's good, though. It is good. I'm not going to critique it too much. I'm just going to brag my PhD thesis is nicer. But that's because I'm pretty. Which is exactly what I said when someone asked me once about my PhD thesis and why I liked it so much. Because any other answer you give just sounds mean to other people. So I just go, I'm pretty. And it's a really good answer to give people if you want to confuse them. So, Robber Barons, Two Courtiers. The Changing World of the Lovers of Titchmarsh. Now, by Monica E. Simon. This book is one of the ones which sometimes I swear the person at Pen and Sword, I sign up for books and I go, yes, accept. And they go, well, he's already taking those. He hasn't said he'll take this, and I've got another one like this as well. But we'll chuck that in the list and send it to him and see what he thinks. And it's one of those things, if you are interested in medieval history, this is a huge amount in it, and it's all about sort of the Tudorish period and the earlier Tudor period. Since Francis Lovell had been sent to prepare the defence of the south coast before Henry Tudor's landing, the question has been raised whether he was present at the Battle of Bosworth. Two sources written immediately after the battle, Henry Tudor's proclamation written on the eve of the battle and the York Memorandum from 23rd of August 1485, or the next day, lists Francis Viscount Lovell as among the dead. Whilst impossible to be certain, it seems likely that Francis Lovell was at Bosworth. As Richard III's Chamberlain, he had to be at the side of the king all the time. The report of the Croyland Chronicle does not specify when Francis Lovell had been sent to the coast, and the commission of array mentioned in the patent rolls dates almost 2 months prior to the battle, allowing sufficient time for Francis to return to Bosworth in time to participate in the battle. The list of dead in the new king's proclamation includes both men who had been killed, like John Howard, Duke of Norfolk, and Richard Ratcliffe, and men who had survived, like Thomas Howard, Earl of John de la Pole, Earl of Lincoln, and Francis Lovell. That the 3 men whose death was wrongly proclaimed by Henry Tudor after the battle were the highest ranking survivors who had fought on Richard's side is an interesting aspect. It is tempting to assume that by declaring them dead, Henry VII tried to discourage opposition to his reign. However, it is most likely that in the confusion immediately after the battle, when the true death toll was not yet known, the proclamation secretly included the highest ranking men of the vanquished side. Richard Ratcliffe was first correctly included in the list of the fallen, but the following day, Henry VII ordered his arrest. It's a very good book. (1981) Why are people so ignorant of history these days? I came across someone who thinks the UK forced Argentina to go to war in 1982. The one thing I learn, and this is the reason I try and answer as many questions as I'm pitched as possible, is history can be it's one of those things which can be most abused because the headlines are easiest to remember. not the context and nuance on them, or the text underneath them. And you always have to remember with history, and this is the real thing with history, every account has a bias. Some of my colleagues, they will quote government sources. Governments have a bias. Even the civil servants. Even when I'm reading a Royal Navy report, which is about their ships movement, and it's their pink slips, and the list of where the ships are, has a bias. You know what that bias is? That bias is that they know where their ships are. That they've had the reports. The bias is that they are basing all this on the presumption of accurate information. Now, I can trust those sources to an extent. But I also tend to have to double check some of them to make sure they're accurate. Make sure that ship is where it's supposed to be. Because sometimes that ship is listed as being there on a certain date, and it might have been there, but it might have already gone by the time they're putting in the report and be on somewhere else. And so I have to be careful. Everyone has a viewpoint, and that viewpoint is their bias. When you're talking about a ship, if you've got someone who is a stoker giving you an account of a battle, it's going to be very different to the account of a battle from a gunner on an anti-aircraft gun, especially if they're on the port side and most of the action takes over on starboard. It's going to be very different to someone who's in the bridge, very different to someone in modern terms who's in the CIC. And the thing is, none of them are wrong and none of them are lying to you. That is the first rule. So many people associate bias with people lying. That's not the truth. Bias doesn't mean that. Bias means, do you have a perspective? Do you have a horse in the race? That doesn't mean you're lying. That means you have a certain perspective. You have a viewpoint. And actually, that bias can work for and against the historian. Because also the historian has a bias. So if a historian is being quite clever, they might check their bias by picking sources which are probably going to be biased in their bias is going to be against them. But it's always there. And it's also one of the reasons why you have to worry about these things. And read multiple books. How goes it? 40 million Bofors and dual purpose 120 millimeter, both radar directed. Maybe even with variable timing fuse. Sending here. The Royal Navy are a big part of it. Gets Copenhagen by the German Navy in 1914. How does that change the war? Germany wins it. That's it. You want to win World War I for the German Navy, you take out the Royal Navy. Because France can't survive without the supplies. Britain can't survive without a Navy. You win... what you want to see World War I end really quickly and a German win, you Copenhagen the Royal Navy. Which is one of the reasons why A, the Royal Navy are positioned where they are, B, why they are organized the way they are, and C, why they are so freaking paranoid. And what a D, for that matter, why Jellicoe is described as the only man who could lose the war in an hour. He could lose it in 30 minutes. Andrew Ernest, ignorant of history? I've heard of a school report that claimed the US put Japanese Americans in concentration camps. They did. They were internment camps, but they're, you know... The problem is concentration camp these days, it tends to be ascribed with the death camps which the Nazis set up. So they combine the two. When as concentration camps actually have been a thing since the British, arguably in the Boer War, but arguably there are other examples of people using similar structures prior to that. And concentration camp just means you've interned people for political reasons. Japanese Americans were put into concentration camps because there was a worry they were a significant fifth column. It's unlikely, but there again, unfortunately, the context of the attack on Pearl Harbor, etc., meant that the demons inside of America, and there are demons inside of everyone, and sometimes the true test of anyone is when they're under stress and they're upset and they're hurting, whether they let their demons out or whether they control them. You have a demon, you have an angel. We all have them. We all have the voice in our head, which we sometimes talk with. Not talk to, but, you know, the idea in hand is, well, I could do that, but I won't. It's the moral compass. It's the little thing on your shoulder. In my case, it probably is my big, fluffy research assistant who would whack me around the head. But leaving that all to one side, that's what happened. And they were concentration camps. They're not death camps, though. And that's the difference. They're not. No one's getting gassed. And they're not fun places to be. They're not nice places to be. And honestly, some of them had really, really bad reputations. But some of them were okay for a prison. So it's, again, falsely imprisoning people because it's presuming just because they're Japanese, they're going to stab you in the back. But that is, as I said, America in 1939, in 1941, 1942. And they do that. Thankfully, they get over it. Thankfully, their angels come back. Sure, a ship might be listed as being somewhere, but not actually be there, i.e. in the Annapolis. Yep. Andrew, were they quoting contemporary sources? I'm aware that up until what happened in World War II was widespread. A concentration camp was used interchangeably for internment camps, pretty much at that time. So that's probably where it's coming from. It's the linguistics of the period. Sure. Didn't the British claim in their official history of World War I claim they sunk ships at Jutland that showed up at Scapa Flow? Let's start on the Admiral Beatty overseeing official history. We'll leave that to one side. Magic Day for one. How do you make burn a decent aircraft carrier? Rip out the engines, put in new ones to give it at least 3 or 4 more knots. Speed, full length flight deck needs to be extended and probably given a round down at the front, along with some accelerators, to use the phrase from a period, what we call catapults these days. Rest the wires. The first thing I need to do is I need to give her speed. And I can't really change her the size of her flight deck that much, and I can't change the size of her hangar that much. But if I can give her some decent speed, then I might be able to get something out of her. Shumi. Sulu, aka George Takei from Star Trek, grew up in one of those camps during World War II. Yep. Andrew, the problem was that the person giving the report didn't know any difference between the German concentration camps and the American internment camps. In the American camps, the death rate was normal. Well, that's give them some history lessons. But it's still not something. The thing is, and I would say this, is America, the one good thing about them is they have a habit of holding themselves to a higher standard than they hold necessarily other people to. And that's rather interesting because that means to many that those shouldn't be have them. Spindrift, you make Byrne a decent carrier by giving her purple hair and a monocle? I am worried severely by that mention of Azur Lane. I am worried. I'm happy people to play Azur Lane. I'm not sure if that would actually work in real life. I'm not sure that would work in real life. Second, all Queen of Class battleships are your Agincourt 18-inch 20-knot ships. How does Jutland change and how do the treaties go? Holy guacamole. Well, for starters, anything which gets hit by a 15-inch shell from one of those gets hit by an 18-inch shell. So there's probably a few less German ships at Jutland. Because they bash things up. Also, they probably probably the Germans are panicking because whilst they can probably get to a 15-inch gun, can they get to an 18-inch gun in time to match the British? Probably not. So they are probably crying out on that one. And how does it change? Well, if the Queen Elizabeths are 18-inch guns, then the R-Class are going to be 18-inch guns. If the R-Class are 18-inch guns, then Hood's going to be 18-inch guns. So the Royal Navy's going to be an 18-inch gun fleet. Which probably means that the treaty limit becomes 18-inch guns. Does Britain get Nelson and Rodney then? If they do, they're going to be 18-inch gun ships. But we're going to have Renown, Repulse, all 18-inch guns. It's going to make the world a very complicated place. And for Germany at World War II, that's going to make it even more complicated. Alfred B228. I wonder if 1944 anti-aircraft defense would force everyone to go night attacks or force the idea of sending in fighters to strafe and rocket the enemy ships for torpedo attack a lot sooner. Probably the latter, as night flying is going to require a lot of training. And it's the British are probably going to go straight there, but that's it. Nighthawk Productions. There was a small island to the west of Pearl Harbor that had damaged plane crash on the 7th. The island had a small population, amongst some of which were first-generation Japanese, one of which assisted the airmen and even took up arms against the other locals. I forget how the whole thing ended. I believe the airman committed suicide and the local who assisted was arrested. I've apologized as I've forgotten the name of the incident, and I want to stress that by no means justification for what happened in the USA, but it had played a part in what was happening. I'm not sure. I've never heard of that story before, so it's an interesting one to hear. But yeah, thank you for that. As for Rosensky's binocular fast, how fast could an 18-inch R-Class go? Well, if you're building Queen Elizabeth to do 28 knots, you've got them with small tube boilers. Then your problem with the R-Class either become repeats at 28 knots of the Queen Elizabeth with 6 18-inch guns, or they become, or they become something. They become, but they go for 25 knots. But honestly, they're gonna have to pick a speed because they're not gonna want them to go back to 21 knots from 28 knots. So they're probably gonna end up going for them being 28 knot and 6-gun ships. Probably the R class become bare bones 18-inch battleships. Right then, let's do this one. Nelson's Navy in 100 Objects. This is a really fun book. It's really quite interesting. Even has a picture of HMS Victory firing a broadside in dry dock in Portsmouth. But it talks about the Battle of Copenhagen. It talks about HMS Trimcomely, which is one of my favourite ships of the period. The fifth rate was dominated by the warship known as a frigate. The frigate was one of the most glamorous and quite often the most lucrative command in the Royal Navy. It was large enough to carry a significant broadside, but was also fast and highly maneuverable, allowing it to usually escape larger warships. The gun deck was specifically designed to be high above the waterline to allow it to safely heel over in strong winds in sharp turns under a lot of canvas to maintain speed while still able to use its guns. It's not unknown for frigates to achieve speeds. It was not unknown for frigates to achieve speeds of 15 knots. Frigates generally displaced in the region of 800 to 1,000 tons. Frigates also cost half the price of a 74-gun ship to produce, so unsurprisingly large numbers were kept in service. They were often used in independent roles as they were too weak to be in line of battle, being more often utilized as lookouts for the main battle fleet, convoy escort duties, patrolling and commerce raiding, including attacking enemy installations along the coast. By convention, large battleships do not usually engage frigates because of their overwhelming firepower, which could easily destroy them, unless they provoked them, and then they were fair game. This sort of independent command was highly sought after, and the greatest frigate captains, such as Cochrane and Host, became household names and were fated like superstars. The constant patrolling of enemy coastal waters gave the opportunity for single combat against enemy frigates, but also the opportunity of capturing numerous enemy merchant ships and gaining prize money. Many frigate captains became very wealthy, and a number of naval dynasties were established on the riches earned during this period. Frigates varied greatly in size from the largest 44 or 46-gun frigates like the Trimcomely, which, although launched in 1817, was built to the classic dimensions of a frigate during the Napoleonic Wars. In the early years of the war, they were routinely armoured 12-pounders, but following a number of actions where enemy frigates outgunned the Bruships, the 18-pounder became the norm. Even so, when fighting the Americans in the War of 1812, whose frigates routinely carried 24-pounders, the British vessels again found themselves outgunned. From 1813, the British Navy began designing frigates with 24-pounders to match the new threat, although the Trimcomely and many others were still fitted with 18-pounders. The 32-gun ship had been the standard size of the British frigate until about 1790, when the larger French 38s forced the Royal Navy to increase the size of their frigates. But even in 1812, there were still 35 of these 32s armed with 12-pounders, still on the Navy list, while there were another 12 32s of a later design with 18-pounders instead. They were not really a nice thing for the French to come across. A larger 36-gun frigate had also been popular since 1750, armed with 18-pounders, and large numbers of this ship continued to be constructed during the war. There were no less than 70 of them in service in 1812. As the French had introduced the 38-gun frigate, the Royal Navy similarly began to produce very large numbers of these, and in 1812 there were 80 of these ships on the list. A later development, the 40-gun frigate, never really became popular, and there were only 13 of them in service in 1813, but 5 more were rapidly ordered in 1813, built of pine, to counter new American frigates. Only a few 44 and 46-gun frigates began to appear towards the end of the war. One other method of producing fifth rates was the razzé. This was a long-established practice whereby decks were removed from ships of the line. 364s, Anson, Mangline, and Indefatigable were cut down in the early years of the war to 38 and 40-gun frigates. And mixed success, however, as this caused the gun decks to be too close to the waterline. There is a problem with razzés. This is a good book. This is a very lovely book. It's written by Gareth Glover, and it's worth a read. And it's worth a Christmas. This is the sort of thing you can buy for someone, and If they are someone who likes naval history and you don't want them talking for the rest of Christmas Day, you buy them this form at Christmas, you give it to them just after they finish lunch, and you will have them amused and kept concentrated for the entirety of Christmas Day and probably most of Boxing Day. If you love them, but you love their silence more, and they love history, this is the book for you. Jonathan Barrett, what about the R's becoming an 18-inch battleship with 4 twin turrets? Because the R's are produced to be the cheaper versions of basic Queen Elizabeth, they're going to not differ that much. So they're going to have the same layout. And so they'll probably go with 6 18-inch guns. They won't go with 8, because then you have to make a bigger, more expensive ship. HMS Hood might still come out with 8 18-inch guns. But, yeah, it's probably going to be 6. Talgazard, 5th rate frigates being half the price compared to 74 guns. I know, I guess the broadside weight was also half or less in Carmish Waters. Pretty much. Let's take from 6831. Not sure if I asked this a while back, but is it arrogant to say the British Empire's greatest gift to the world, to history, and to the future is that the like will never be seen again? Potentially, but you must remember the Wikipedia article on the British Empire does mention that you can help by expanding this list. So basically what I'm saying is don't upset me and Drac NFL. We're British and we're just about crazy enough. Anuk, were there frigate commanders that didn't accept promotion because they would lose money? There were lots of frigate commanders who have fought being assigned to anything other than a frigate. They really didn't want to do it. I found it's called the Nilau incident. I will look it up later. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Rapper Razorback. If you love them, but love their silence more. It works. Okay, so Pope's greatest adversary. This is about Girolamo Savonarola, and it's by Samantha Morris, and she's cool. This is one of those books which I honestly didn't expect. Again, it's one of those ones which I swear I don't even ask for, they just put in. And it's got chapters like Old the Ruin of the World, Young Dominican, Hailstorm, Lorenzo de' Medici, Divisions, The Expulsion of Medici, The Bourgeois Pope, The Duel of the British Giants, The Bonfire of the Vanities, The Tables Turn, The Ordeal by Fire and the Siege of San Marco, I May Easily Die If You Torture Me More, Martyrdom and Legacy. It's a new book from Pen and Sword, and it's fun. It's nice and short. So if this isn't really your area, you can still have fun reading this. It's the sort of book you buy and go, whew. If you have anyone who's into religious history, if you have anyone who, how do I put this, occasionally turns a little bit conspiracy theory when talking about orientated when talking about the Catholic Church, they're going to love this book. If you have anyone who's just interested in a good read about the various antics of the churches in this period, they're going to enjoy this book. Okay. Charles believed that he had a solid claim to the throne of Naples, and his followers encouraged him to take what was his. After months of differing, it was agreed that the French army would invade Italy. They crossed the Alps on the 8th of September in 1494, with the aim of taking control of Naples. The army was massive, 19,000 infantry, 1,900 lances, and 1,200 mounted archers, supported by 1,500 Italian lancers and around 300 Italian infantry. Finally, Savonarola's new Cyrus was coming, and during his Lenten sermons, he took to the pulpit and cried out, "Behold, the sword has descended, the scourge has fallen, and the prophecies are being fulfilled. Behold, it is the Lord who is leading on these armies." Yeah. As the French advanced throughout Italy, blood was shed in a way the Italians had never seen before. They were not usually so ferocious on the battlefield, and much of the time, battles on Italian soil came away with very few casualties. But in this case, the French army gave no quarter. As it moved southwards, it conquered towns, slaughtering the citizens in their beds, while houses were burned to the ground and women were raped. How could the people of Florence not believe that the friars' prophecies were finally coming true? How could they not be frightened for their very lives, and in a complete lack of confidence in their leader, Piero? And it made for a particularly explosive situation. When Savonarola preached that when the French finally arrived, Piero would do the opposite of what he should, and this came true as well, it caused a stir. As the army advanced through Italy, it met little resistance, with many states declaring themselves to be neutral. But to reach Naples, Charles would have to pass through Tuscany. So he sent envoys to Piero, seeking permission to pass through Tuscan borders and to publicly back his claim to the throne of Naples. Here Piero began playing a dangerous game. He kept the envoys waiting for 5 days and promised to fill Florentine support to the king of Naples before declaring that Florence would remain completely neutral. The French king disliked the young Medici immensely. After he had sent 2 disastrous embassies over to France, Florence had always been an ally of the French. So when Piero made the decision to switch his allegiance to Naples, it was seen as a betrayal by Charles and by the Florentines who worked in the French court as ambassadors. One such ambassador was Piero de Giuliano Camponi, had become a close friend of the French king, a friendship which enabled the moment Piero de' Medici made the decision to move his alliance to Naples, a friendship which ended the moment Piero de' Medici made the decision to move his alliance to Naples. He did this without any input from government officials. Even the public knew that, and refused to place any blame whatsoever on the Signora. No, it was all Piero's fault. Its declaration of neutrality angered both sides, but France took matters into her own hands. There was absolutely no way they would allow Piero and his city to remain neutral. Charles marched on Tuscany anyway. In an effort to stop the French army, Piero stood up and tried to do the right thing. He hired a number of mercenaries, sent them to key Tuscan fortresses, and prepared to take himself off to the fight. Unfortunately for him, however, a certain Dominican friar had managed to convince the populace that their doom had come. The sword lord had finally descended. When Piero asked the Signora for more money to help the city with its defences, they refused. Reeled in by Savonarola, they said that there was no point in defending a city that was already ruined. Piero's cousins agreed and sent a message to the French king offering their full support for him in his invasion, but the message was intercepted, and the brothers arrested. They escaped to their confinement, however, and managed to find their way to the French encampment, where they assured Charles that if Piero were to be got rid of, the city of Florence would readily support French efforts in Naples. Piero, never a popular leader, realized that he was on his own. No one wanted to help the man in his efforts to protect Tuscany. His next move made him even less popular with the government of the city that he was supposed to lead. Without bothering to seek their approval, he left Florence and rode to Charles's camp at San Stefano in order to gain his friendship and convince him that he had been wrong in remaining neutral. He offered anything the French king wanted in return for Florence remaining safe from the French forces. Proving himself to have the greater authority, Charles made huge demands of Piero, who acquiesced to every point, handing over Pisa and the numerous castles that would have been the last line of Florentine's defence, as well as the huge sum of 20,000 florins. Young Medici left believing his mission had been a success, as he had done the best he could to protect the city. Savonarola, meanwhile, had been on his own excursion to meet the French king, and he was much more successful. It took him to Pisa, where he was warmly welcomed. The friar spoke to Charles of church reform and of calling a council to depose Alexander VI. But he also gained firm assurance from the king that while the French would advance into the city in triumphal possession, the army was not hostile to France or to Florence or her people. Giovanni Savonarola returned to Florence in good spirits. It's an interesting time. Sherlock, how long? Hold on, I need to download GIMP. Oh, good lord. That's worrying me. Jack Ray, Nelson's name. So you're saying you can buy someone's silence? For a few hours, yes. Right, as I've come in, I've got the sound turned off, and you're stroking the copy of Nelson's Navy in 100 objects. Without the sound, it was hysterical. I'm sure it was more. Seneca, Samurai is a pre-Martin Luther reformist. True. Ah. Remember, what book is this? My heretical side is always looking for good and new creative ways to annoy the church. The Pope's Greatest Adversary, Signoramo Savonara. It's down there by written by Samantha Morris. It's excellent. And I would. Knight 681 is a tri-jet, terrible maritime patrol aircraft. It's not what I would prefer to pick if I had the choice. Steph Thompson, people get hung up on Game of Thrones. Real history is far more entertaining. Thank you, Doctor. It is. And as we're on real history, Hetzer, the Jagdpanther 38 tank destroyer. Again, naval historian who likes armored warfare, yes, but this got sent to me. And I was going, well, it's cool. It's got lots of pictures in it. It's if you are an ardent modeler who likes building these sort of vehicles and are interested at all in World of Tanks and those things and the Jagdpanther, this is great history in here. It explains all about them, explains what they get up to, it explains where they're used. It's really, really interesting to read. Now, I have to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of Germany's World War II vehicles. I honestly think they're complicated and sometimes a little overly obsessively complicated. But the Jagdpanther is one of those ones which, again, is kind of something I have a little, I do like a little bit of. Mainly because it just looks so funny. Come on. Tell me, doesn't that look funny to you? And this is a good read, and it's really interesting because it goes through the various model makers. And I actually learned of something I hadn't known before. I learned about Dragon Models. They're a Hong Kong-based company, and they started releasing model kits, especially this variety, in 1994. But they're a really cool little production company, and they produce really cool and detailed little kits. So there's something to look out for. And that is one of the good things about this. This book does have a model showcase in. So if you're thinking about buying it, you can look at all the different showcase models and you can decide which might be the better one for you to start off with. That's a good page. So if you like this stuff, this is a good book to get. It doesn't really have much to read in here in terms of technical. So it's not a reading book, but it is certainly, if you're planning on doing some modeling and you want to be very accurate model of your Jagdpanther, this is a good book to have. And I found it quite cool to read, despite the fact I will never make a model tank like this. Don't take this the wrong way. I like making my model ships, and I have an F6 helmet I've got to build, but and a few others as well sitting back here. But I tend to build planes. I tend to build ships. I don't tend to build tanks. Although I do have a stonking collection of Matilda tanks, but we'll leave that to one side. That's me and my army of Matildas. Hello, Constantine. I got into naval history because I got fed up with the lack of supply chain in Warhammer 40k. Whoa, yeah. Oh, there are so many issues with Warhammer 40k in terms of logistics. No, there are some good German systems, but there are also some which are quite strange. Steinhardt Production. Dragon recently released a 3-in-1 Type 42 destroyer kit. You can build Type 3 ship with the option of either Type 1 or Type 2. Oh, cool. Would the Nimrod AEW3 have worked had they used the E2 Hawkeye configuration that was proposed for it instead of, well, they chose, and if that they had, will we be buying the E7A to replace later? That's a lot of variables. We probably still would end up buying the E7. But when we buy it, we're not sure. But yeah, as Dutch God says, range is a bit short, but otherwise it'd be able to be converted, and you could always add in refueling. How do you make Nimrod RA4 work? It was working, they just decided to cut it. And does 9 seem reasonable? No, but there again, I'd always like more. Hi, Dan Freeman. Honestly, it's probably because they say boo when they turn up. Right. I'm now down to 2 piles. I've got through 1 whole pile. I'm going to start off with this one. Justinian II, the Roman emperor who lost his nose and his throne and regained both. That's a pretty cool book. There have been people who've been asking me about Japanese. I'm sorry, someone just had to write Japanese anime nerd in the chat. So there have been people who have asked me about Justinian a lot over the years, and especially recently when we've been doing this some talks to the channel. I know there are some people who are big fans of Justinian. And this is the first really good book, which is, I would say, entirely focused on. There are lots of books which have been good about Justinian, which have got various things focused on parts of him, his campaigns, they're all good books. This is a book about Justinian. And the conquest of Carthage. Having brought an end to the Second Fitna and won a significant victory at Sebastos, Abdul al-Malik sent up to 40,000 of his freed-up forces under Hassan al-Banura to re-establish the Arab position in Africa. With the biggest Arab army yet to deploy to Africa, Hassan was to accomplish much. More than that, his military achievements and administrative institutions were to create the first real Arab government in Africa, making him in many ways the real founder of Muslim North Africa. Unfortunately, the campaigns of Hassan in Africa suffered from the same historiographical issues as his predecessors, meaning that the dating of his adventures can be confused. This is best demonstrated by the lack of clarity over exactly when Hassan took control of Carthage for the first time. It could have been as early as 695 that the Arab commander marched into a poorly defended and sparsely populated Carthage, with many of its inhabitants possibly evacuated to Sicily. Rather than defend Carthage, a Romano-Berber force had congregated near Hippo, but suffered a major defeat when Hassan squared up to them. This left Hassan in control of what had been Africa province, largely equivalent to modern Tunisia. This slightly earlier date for the first Arab capture of Carthage may help explain how Leontius managed to receive word of its fall, gathered together, and then launched an expedition to reclaim the city within his brief reign. It could be argued that Leontius might have planned the expedition to save the African exile trade in general, but it seems less likely that he would have mobilized such an expedition without the disastrous loss of Carthage to spur him on. To lead this African expedition, Leontius chose John the Patrician, an experienced and competent man, furnished him with the entire Roman fleet. There is likely some hyperbole in this pronouncement of the size of the expedition, with only the Correcti squadron of the Kirathites actually recorded among the fleet to South Africa. At a time when Leonidas was newly on the throne and faced with conflict against the Arabs in Anatolia, would he have really dispatched all of his naval forces to Western Mediterranean? However, it could be imagined that the some squadrons from the various fleets, Carosian, if it still existed, the Hellenic theme, forces defending Constantinople, attached to Obsidian, and more of the Keprats beyond the Crossgids, would attach to join John's expedition. It might also be expected that various themes would have contributed land forces as well. Such Constantinopolitan expeditions to Africa tend to stop off in Sicily, so it could be that John did the same and picked up some Sicilian thematic forces. John may even have received some manpower support from Witzathia and Agathia, the kings of the Goths in Spain. Whatever the makeup of John the Patrician's expedition, it was strong enough to immediately force its way into Carthage's harbour by severing the large chain across its mouth. The Roman expedition then defeated the garrison left by Hassan and established full control of the city. From his new base, John set about reclaiming large sections of the former African province, defeating any Arab forces he found there and garrisoning it with his own men. He then sent word back to Leonidas in Constantinople regarding his success and to ask for further instructions. Clarke claimed that he was to winter in Africa, with the understanding perhaps that he was to consider himself the new African exarch and prepare for the inevitable Arab counterattack. It is a very good book. Yes, he had to regain not only his lost throne, but his nose. Okay, so sorry, John Shea should regain his nose. What? Yes, that's part of this. I'm not going to get into that section because that spoils half the fun. But yes, he does regain his nose. Alzaski, I finally got partial hold of my modeling desk. Still fighting on the approach path. My wife tends to put things everywhere. Good luck, my friend. Good luck. Early era prosthetics concentratinus. And some of the ones he tries might well make you, how do I put this? Gag a bit. 900 productions. On ASW work, why did Canada choose to build converted Bristol Britannias for ASW work instead of just purchasing Alvaro shackles? Job creation? That, and not just job creation, skill creation. Remember, if you want to set up a functioning aero industry, you need to actually do some work for that. Okay. So, next one. This one is incredibly cheap if you want to look it up, and it shouldn't be because it's a really, really good book. It's a game of birds and wolves, and it's the secret game that revolutionized the war, Simon Parkin. And this is the thing. In the first week of 1942, a group of unlikely heroes, a retired naval captain and a clutch of brilliant young women, gathered to form a secret strategy unit. On the top floor of a bomb-bruised HQ in Liverpool, the Western Approaches Tactical Unit spends days and nights designing and playing war games in effect to crack the U-boat tactics. As the U-boat wolf packs continue to prey upon the supply ships, the Wrens race against time to save Britain. Now, it is on the novelistic side, certainly, but it is a cracking read. Exactly 3 weeks after sinking of the Aguila, Winston Churchill, who had replaced Neville Chamberlain as Prime Minister the previous year, addressed Parliament to announce that the government would no longer be playing by the rules of Germany's so-called tonnage game. The publication of official monthly figures reporting shipping losses to U-boats would cease. To justify the information blackout, Churchill argued it is not desirable to give the enemy too precise or, above all, too early information of the success or failure of each of his various manoeuvres. He added for reassurance, the public and indeed the whole world have, however, derived the impression that things have gone much better. I cannot deny that this is so. In private, however, Churchill knew the truth. Close to 3 million tons of shipping had been destroyed in the first 6 months of 1941. The Prime Minister's order to the Minister of Information, Duff Cooper, who had, like Colin's parents, sent his son to America as an evacuee, the discontinued publication of monthly losses was not only motivated to hide information from the Germans, but also to hide it from the British people. The autumn imports to Britain had fallen to 2/3 of the pre-war level, mostly thanks to the success of the U-boat campaign. Even with ever more stringent rationing, in March 1914, a meat allowance was cut to 1 shilling's worth, around £1 of meat per person a week. The Ministry of Food was questioning how it could continue to provide British citizens with sufficient calories each day. British diet had been forced to move away from the fat-rich foods, which made up 38% of the average calorie intake pre-war, to a carbohydrate-rich diet of wholemeal bread and potatoes. The shift not only flattened the variety and taste of Britain's typical diet, it had also negated and had negative practical consequences. For a manual labourer to obtain the 4,000 calories they needed for a day's work in carbohydrates alone, they would have to spend almost the entire day eating. Fatigue became widespread in the workforce. In his memo, Churchill warned Cooper that the press would accuse the government of attempting to cover up the sides of our most recent shipping losses. When responding to journalists, the Prime Minister advised Cooper to say, "Well, that is what we are going to do anyway." After all, Churchill added, "we shall have a lot worse to put up with in the near future." This is a very, very good book. Okay, sure, Mac. It might have been you get the pick of the litter in terms of ships that have been misinterpreted or mistranslated. There are so many of those. John Farrer, your thoughts on the Osprey publication campaign series? I have Java C 1942 and Coronel Falklands 1914. They're good. They're a good starting books. If there was someone that who could always see what was going on underwater, how fast that person ASW officer? If they can see what's going on underwater, how far away can they see it from? Can they see straight through the water in front of them, or do they know what's going on in the water several miles away? Because if it's just what's in front of them down to a depth of, let's say, 20 meters, then that's not really much help. This is the problem. You have to get into the realities of it, and how can they see it? What are the limitations? They might be good for an anti-submarine warfare officer. They might be better for an intelligence officer. 9681. The British had several ideas for military applications of VC-10, but was it just lack of airframes that killed most of the minus tankers? No, it was lack of interest. Spindrift. I did my master's thesis on Western Project Journal. The headquarters building is preserved exactly as it was in Liverpool by City Centre. Recommended. You can also feel Max Horton's ghost glaring at you, and probably Percy Noble's because he set it all up. But yeah, I've wandered around it. It's good. Let's put it this way. World War II was a fun time for everyone. Right then. We have Greece Against Rome by Philip Matasic. The Fall of the Hellenistic Kingdoms, 250 to 31 BC. So, this is one of the interesting things. Now, when you start hearing about the Hellenistic kingdoms, you think, oh, it must mean just in Greece, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. It's Rome and the Greek world, peak Hellenism, a world at war, Kings of War, Philip V against Rome, Roman Antiochus III, Rome's go east. So you have all the various kingdoms. You're talking about the kingdom of Pontus, the kingdom of all the Alexander successor generals, Alexander successor kingdoms, basically. The decline of Seleucids and the fall of Greece. And the Seleucids are probably my favourite. If you've ever played the original version of Rome Total War, the Seleucids were a pretty good force to fight with. You could actually give the Roman army a severe kicking if you want to do with the Seleucids. The fact that they do climb is mostly thanks to the idiots of their kings. Rather to general surprise, Demetrius proved to be an effective king. In a way, he had to be, because his overall reputation was to be forever sullied by his blatant execution of his relative, the previous king. This was later to become almost the standard Seleucid means of succession, and henceforth the slowly crumbling empire was to be an almost constant state of civil war between various claimants to the throne. As was usual when a new Seleucid king took over, the first order of business for Demetrius was to suppress a wave of rebellions. The first of these was against Maccabees in Judea, who were deeply miffed by the execution of Lysias, of whom they had grown rather fond. The other more serious affair was in Mesopotamia, where the governor decided that he had done so well in standing off the aggressive Parthian king Mithrates that he was entitled to rule Mesopotamia as a king in his own right. I can't think why the king who appointed him disagreed with us. Demetrius demonstrated to the Maccabees, in no uncertain terms, that they were incapable of standing the Seleucid army in the field. Then, having blooded his army in successful combat, he moved east and retook Mesopotamia. Tradition of Hellenistic kings marrying their female relatives in order to one another had by now broken down, as the Macedonian line was as good as extinct, and the Egyptians were apparently set upon marrying each other. This led to the sister of Demetrius, another Lurdos, naturally as a serious liability, since whoever married her had a serious claim to the throne. In the end, Demetrius adopted the pharaonic solution and married his sister himself. Yeah, let's be honest. Game of Thrones? Aunts and nephews? Frankly, that's nothing compared to real history. Siblings, and siblings doing nothing, but actual siblings marrying and ruling. Game of Thrones didn't have that in it. Real history, far more complicated every single time. And this book is cool. No, it's not surprising Blackman was working on a stealth bomber. Everyone was working on a stealth bomber at some point. Jack Ray reminds me of finding out the UK had a ration after World War II. It's a bit of an eye-opener that about the continuing costs of war, even after the fact. Mm-hmm. That awesome. Yes. Well, this is why I still have the original Rome Total War, because actually I preferred it to the more recent version. More recent version, they got so obsessed with the idea of making everything fun and interactive, and you're sort of going, it doesn't really work like that. I would need to raise these troops in the city. I would need to control the city, and it wouldn't be like this. Mm-hmm. Sorry, someone's just knocking on my door. I'll be back in a second. Because I'm presuming if someone's knocking on my door, I have to go move it. Rapparosa, my wife heard your voice and wailed in despair. I know not why. Hello, Mrs. Razorback. Hello. John Barrett, did you know that Philip Macedon didn't go for Sparta, and neither did his son Alexander the Great? No, because there's some things you just don't worry or bother about. And frankly, Sparta, despite all its billing, is just not worth it. Besides, there are better ways to beat the Spartans than fighting them. A lot better ways to beat the Spartans than fighting them. Hello, I'm coming. Hey, bye, gum. Sorry, pot have fallen over. Or rather, probably been knocked over by something. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Why did that roll that scrolled up? Right. Okay. Hello, Thomas Anna. Good day, Dr. C. Thanks all. Bushman included. The one last week was with Sal's and Iron. Sadly, Drac wasn't there. That would have been epic. It would have been a lot of complaining about politicians. So now, the Battle Cruiser New Zealand. Now, if you haven't got this book, why? If you love naval history, this is one of the coolest books out there. It's by Matthew Wright, and it is gorgeous. It's just so rich. It's got pictures, it's got cool history, it's got maps and diagrams of the ship that go through it and give you details of it. Those are just the turrets. Just cool. It is a really, really cool book. And it's one of those things which you'll enjoy reading. You will really enjoy reading. It's even got all the chapters detailing all the loans and costs of it. Seneca, did you have a talk with your neighbour about Guy Fawkes' night artillery barrage? Well, the artillery barrage continued the next night as well, so yes, we had a talk. It was sorted, though. So, let's go to this chapter. Even got pictures of the Pupil gifted to Captain Lionel Halsey. The South African reception was a mere aperitif for what awaited in New Zealand, where the battlecruiser focused a lot of emotional artifice that entangled self-identity, patriotism, and the empire. Plans for the ship's New Zealand tour have been made, remade, and reorganised on the back of that status. Amid a fervent explosion of public enthusiasm, both at the local body and central government level, Massey decided to hand administration over to the Internal Affairs Department and appointed his colleague, Francis Henry Dillon Bell, to manage the process. Bell, married to his friends, was a former parliamentarian and lawyer who led the Legislative Council and was in many respects Massey's key administrator. At the time, he was acting Minister of the Marine, but his appointment to the tour underscored the importance Massey placed on the visit. Politically, it was a winner. In a time where labour unrest had already broken into violence, where strikes loomed among the coal miners and waterside workers, Massey needed a public distraction. Massey needed a public distraction, and New Zealand provided it. Demand to see the ship prompted large public meetings in many towns, calling on local authorities to act. Bell fielded most of them, and requests continued to pour in after the schedule had been announced. And even after the ship had arrived, part of the drive came from civil rivalries. In this age of town boosterism, a curious phenomenon where local identity and status was defined by urban centre. If the ship visited one harbour, then the authorities of nearby harbours felt snubbed, even if their port was too small or too shallow to accommodate the battlecruiser. Meanwhile, mayors of inland towns, such as Effingham and Taranaki, begged extension of the ship's visit to the nearby coastal port of New Plymouth to ensure opportunity for country people, especially the children, to visit. Other inland mayors worried about crowding. If the people of Ashburton could not visit the ship at Lyttelton, could they not do so at Timaru? Schools were eager for children to visit the ship, which Bell resolved by arranging for the Ministry of Education to fund railway tickets. Bell also commandeered the government steamer Tutagani, a Clyde-built cable ship of some 811 gross tons, to follow New Zealand around the country, ferrying the public to the battlecruiser in places where she could not berth. She was not the only ship copter to do so, but Bell's decision underscored the complicated decisions created by weather. Many New Zealand harbours, including Napier and Gisborne, two largest of the North Island's east coast, were too shallow for the ship to enter, and Halsey could not risk anchoring in the roadsteads during high seas. The schedule was also time limited. Bell was reduced to batting off some of the more insistent demands, though always politely. The arrangement for the journey of the battleship have been made with great care, he explained in terse telegraphic language to the chairman of the Wangari Harbour Board. And I fear the day required for a visit to Wangari cannot be spared. This is a really, really cool book. A really cool book. Consequence, only the Brits would celebrate a bomb plot to decapitate the government with fireworks. Or am I mistaken? Not really, but we do like it. I basically suggested very politely, very, very politely, that he perhaps learn some targeting lessons. And that next time it might be a hose. Let's see, how many books we got? Good lord. By my count, and I'm sure this count is correct because it's sitting right in front of me, I have 8 books left. Alright, Bar Cobra. The Jew Who Defied Hadrian and Challenged the Might of Rome by Lindsay Powell. Now, this is again one of those books which I'm not sure how I got it, but it's rich in history. It's beautiful in history. It has wondrous works in it. And it's a personal account. 19 centuries before I arrived in Israel by air, Hadrian had entered the region by road. He often travelled by sea, but the itinerary for this leg of his trip called for a route overland. I imagine that he was very likely to have been the cause of congestion on many an ancient road. Like any modern head of state, a virtual mobile city accompanied him on his official journeys. He travelled with thousands of men and women. Along with his close travel companions, Sabina and Antonius, was an imperial entourage, hand-picked adjutants, secretaries, and physicians. The emperor's security detail of household cavalry, the equites singulares Augusti, and 2 or more likely 4 praetorian cohorts, perhaps up to 5,000 men, combined a constant stream of messengers bringing official correspondence from Rome, taking back his written replies, and slaves of every kind, some tending to the imperial family's personal needs, including his barber, cooks and servers, porters for carrying their baggage, and others for minding the pack animals and driving the carriages and wagons. Travel in the Roman world was time-consuming, and the dangers lurked. Going by sea meant having to plan to arrive at a destination before the shipping lanes were effectively closed in late autumn and winter. Hadrian had left Rome in early 128 CE, boarding 28 Common Era, boarding a galley at Portus and traversing the Mediterranean Sea, Mare Nostrum, as the confident Romans thought of it, to reach Africa. Having completed his business there, he sailed to Athens, where he spent the winter months. While in the Greek city, he dedicated a new temple to Olympian Zeus, Olympian Deus, that he had ordered to be finished during his last visit, and an altar erected in his name. Afterwards, long a benefactor of the city, Hadrian accepted the title Olympios and received divine honours in the temple. At Ilios, just outside Athens in September that year, he and Antonius were initiated into the ancient cult of Demeter and Persephone. The following spring, Hadrian, his boy, and his retinue departed for Asia, crisscrossing Anatolia to visit the provinces of Palamia, Tigre, Cilicia, Syria, Comagene, Cappadocia, where he received slaves for service with the army, Pontus and Syria again. He is known to have been in Apania, in Persia, in 23rd of July, 129 CE. Always a disciplinarian, as he went about the provinces, he punished procurators and governors as their actions demanded, and indeed, with such severity that it was believed that he incited those who brought in the accusations. As political and military leader of the Res Publica, or Commonwealth, he diligently conducted his duties by befriending kings and potentates from beyond the frontiers, with whom he exchanged diplomatic gifts, and exercised his civic duties when he met with local dignitaries from communities within the borders. Now, 12 years in his reign, he would reward loyalty with benefactions and exert the soft power that his presence brought to any whom wavered. Hadrian visited Palermo, the exotic semi-autonomous city on the border of his empire. An ancient Las Vegas located in the Syrian desert, its economic prosperity depended on the trade passing between neighboring Roman and Parthian superpowers. Despite the precariousness of its position, the Palmyrian community was plenty wealthy and enjoyed a hedonistic lifestyle. Hadrian was fortunate to visit in its heyday during happy times. The people welcomed him as the second founder of their famous city, and renamed it Hadronia Palmyra in his honor. In response, he declared Palmyra a free city and assigned an officer, a curator, to manage the treasury. It was a truly impressive place, blending Greek and Roman architecture for its public spaces with local Arabic styles for domestic residents. Even in its ruined state, it has become a major tourist attraction in Syria in modern times. People have wandered upon the paved stones of the colonnade street, admired the wedge-shaped triumphal arch, given impromptu performances in its theatre to rest out its acoustics, and ogled at the gigantic temple of Zeus, or Bar Shaman, set in its vast peristical style, originally paid for by Hadrian. That stopped abruptly when the terrorist group Daesh ISIS seized the archaeological park, systematically destroyed its precious artifacts with hammers and explosives, and on the 15th of August 2015 murdered Khaled al-Assad, who had devoted his life to preserving its legacy. The precise sequence of cities Hadrian called on during 129 CE is uncertain, despite years of careful study by scholars. He likely stopped at Antia on the Antantes, modern Antakya in Turkey, in Syria or after July. It is recorded that the city celebrated a Hadrian, or a Hadrianic festival in his honor. This is a very, very good book. 50 greatest shipwrecks. Can you name a few? Well, I'm on my last pile, then that book's number 4 down to get to that pile, so it will wait till we get to that book. How's that sound? Jonathan Barrett, if New Zealand and Australia keep the battle cruisers, what would the USN IGN response be? Something similar or something else? It would depend on the criteria of them keeping them. If they are keeping them as independent powers, and they claim that's their status level, then IJN and USN can't really demand a response. If they're keeping them as part of the Royal Navy, then the Royal Navy probably would want to give them something newer. So, as much as we love New Zealand and Australia, the odds are they probably get some of the big cats. They probably get tiger and lion. Thank you, Jack Ray. What naval small arms saw the most action? The Brown Bess musket? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. Although the Lee Enfield did quite well and was around for a long time. But in terms of small arms, you've got cutlasses, you've got boarding pikes. They're quite common. And they're around for a long time. Let's be honest, sword chain shape, the boarding pikes have been around for a very, very long time. And basically, a boarding pike is a shortened pike to make it more useful at sea. It's a pole arm, but it's a pole arm which has been adapted for the confines of naval warfare. Pigeon, we have a Palmyra in upstate New York between Syracuse, Rome, and Utica. Sadly, ancient city was badly vandalized by ISIS. True. They have got good records, but actually restoring it would be a lot of work. And Who knows what the current government in Syria is going to do on that front? Who knows what they're prepared to do? So, we have next the usurpers. A new look at medieval kings. By Michelle Miracle. And this is an interesting book for me because I have. How do I put this? I have some views on medieval kings, mostly thanks to Glenn Richardson and him teaching me for 3 years at university at St Mary's University College when I did my bachelor's. Glenn Richardson is an amazing Tudor historian. He's written a book called Renaissance Monarchy. He's written other articles. He is exceptional. And this book looks at William the Conqueror, Stephen Bloor, Henry Bolingbroke, Edward IV, Richard III, and Henry Tudor. It looks at others as well. In fact, this full list of kings it looks at is William the Conqueror, King Stephen, King Henry IV, Edward IV, Richard III, Henry VII, and it covers pretty much everyone else in there, including Empress Matilda. And it has this chapter which is Was Stephen a Usurper, which is chapter 60, page 6, that's from page 62. And it's an interesting one to read. Stephen's reign as King of England from 1135 to 1154 was dominated by an English civil war known as the Anarchy. Although he began his tenure as a popular, well-liked ruler, the abundance of years spent battling Empress Matilda and Henry weakened his hold on the throne. His inability to put down his rivals shook the confidence of both his English nobles and commoners. Unlike William the Conqueror, Stephen did not contribute to improvements in the governance of the kingdom, nor did he leave any lasting legacy or note. He was more inclined towards peace than fighting, which was not a strong characteristic for a medieval king. His inability to maintain law and order causes people to turn against him and look for another alternative. King Stephen I of England had long been considered a usurper for stealing the crown from his cousin Matilda. There was no precedent at the time for a female ruler, and Stephen was very nearly the closest male blood relative to Henry I. Stephen also claimed that Henry chose him to succeed on his deathbed, so was Stephen really a usurper? Let's remind ourselves of the formal definition of the word usurp, which is to seize and hold a position, office, power by force or without legal right. In 12th century England, there were no strict rules when it came to succession. It was very much a fluid thing at the time, usually with the eldest legitimate male heir inheriting from his father. But obviously, there were situations where there was no legitimate male heir to inherit. In those cases, it was basically up to the ruler to make his choice. Although there were no laws forcing the people to follow the king's choice. King Henry I selected his legitimate daughter Matilda as his heir, because he lacked a legitimate male heir. This must have been a stunning announcement at the time, since England had never witnessed a female ruler. However, which kind of forgets Boudica and all the others, but we'll leave that to one side. However, shocking it might have been, there was no law against it. Not only did Henry announce Matilda as heir, he went to great lengths to have his barons swear oaths of fealty to her, including her own cousin Stephen. When Henry I died, Stephen saw the chance to overpower what he saw as a stereotypical weak woman, so he could steal the crown for himself. Stephen had no legal right to the throne. He had never been named by Henry as the heir, despite his claim that King Henry named him as his successor as he lay dying. In fact, Stephen wasn't even closest in bloodline to Henry I. If male succession had been strictly followed, Robert Curthouse would have been the king after William the Conqueror, and Robert's son William Clito would have been next in line after that. Due to King William's conflict with his son Robert, he chose to bypass Robert and pass the throne to his second son William, who in turn passed it to his brother Henry I. Being that Stephen had no legal right to the throne and stole it from Matilda, Stephen is well deserving of the title of usurper king. This is a cool book. And again, going back to the earlier discussion of Game of Thrones, the real Game of Thrones is far nastier and far meaner. Mwah. Seneca, what is the last ship that carried the boarding pikes? Officially as part of its arsenal, I think possibly HMS Warrior. I'm fairly sure quite a few of the ships in that period still had boarding pikes. But unofficially, there might have been some more recent ships. In fact, there's an interesting discussion in World War II about some of the weapons that are used. Professor, Chalcray, purposely removing history is sad. It robs the future of knowing of the past. You only erase history if you are weak. You only erase history if you're uncertain of the future. That is the reasons you erase history. You only burn books if you're scared because your ideas aren't that good. People who are confident in their ideas, who are confident in their place in the world, who are confident in their future and confident in their ability to rule, do not seek to do these things. They don't seek to erase books. They don't seek to erase history. They don't seek to erase these things because if you're confident, you don't need to. Governments which are really weak but want to look strong, they're the ones who try burning books. Governments which are strong don't need to. Governments which are strong and confident themselves don't need to censor what books are in classrooms. They trust that the students will read the books and read other books. That's the thing you do. You don't sit there and go, "Oh, I don't like this book, so you can't have it in the classroom." You put in this book and you put in the other book and you go, "Look, this is the better book. You can read this book. But it's not going to impress you as much as this one, which is what we support." And that's the point. The moment you burn this book, if you don't like it, the moment you remove it from the classroom, you make it forbidden and you give it far more strength than if you leave it in the classroom and let it argue its position out with this one. Which is honestly the way you should always carry it. Because it depends on your approach to education. If you believe everyone should just read one thing and one view and turn out, then that's good. You're trying to raise a group of automatons. But if you want education to turn out thinking, capable human beings who can adjust and adapt as the world changes around them, then you need them to read both books and come to their own position. Sorry. Andrew Reynolds. Sorry, internet's been camping out lately. Hmm. 9641. Why do none of the proposals for British military version of the Airbus A300 and Airbus A310 never work? Because is actually the British military proposing them, or are they proposed by think tanks and various people trying to suggest them? And also, Airbus is a European project. It's not Airbus is the European manufacturing firm. It would require more than Britain being interested for anyone to actually get involved in it. And I don't think actually the Royal Air Force has actually proposed anything itself for the Airbus A300 or Airbus A310. Usually it doesn't suit our needs. Sure, because reality doesn't have to worry about killing off a protagonist. Nope, they don't. Sure, if you feel strong, you don't erase history, you write your own. Sounds nice and credible. It does. Shermack, when you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him a lie. You are only telling the world you fear what he might say. Clearly applies to a political group that I disagree with. Yeah. Basically, if you're strong and confident in your politics, then you don't need to ban books. Senator, I read both Das Kapital and Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf was complete BS, and Das Kapital is really outdated and ignores the hardship of country life. Yep. In fact, honestly, Das Kapital has so many things that are wrongs in it. Those modification designs are proposed by Avro. So they are proposed by a company trying to sell something to the government and government then take them. That's not really proposed by the British military, is it? Not. Vision, we have a few rail manufacturers too, European and Japanese factories. New York State has an economy similar to England. New York City is London, and upstate is the Midlands, Lake District and Northumberland. Sometimes, can you cut that portion out and share it on Twitter about books? It's so aptly said it needs to be shared on standalone. I might try to. And I have to say, I've read the Little Red Book, I've read Mao's book, I've read all these books, and look at me. I don't think I practice any of them. Anyway, the book I've been using for demonstrating this is The Royal Mysteries of the Medieval Period by Timothy Benning, and this is definitely a book you want to get if you are interested in mysteries. It's, again, for those of you who like watching conspiracy theory books and conspiracy theory television programs and whodunits and all those things, you would love this history book. It's A Murder or Not, The Death of William II, An Accident. Edward II, Murder or Escape. Richard II, 1400, more certainly dead, but was it murder or suicide? And Whale the Pretenders. Chapter 4, The Princes in the Tower, Who Killed Them, if anyone. And Chapter 5, Edward IV's Marriages, Was he a bigamist? Basically, Edward IV gets a lot of mentions in here. Anyway, let's go to my favourite chapter, which is, and I have to say, is Richard II, which starts on page 67. And it's a rather cool chapter because, and I'm not going to read it all to you because that would basically ruin the book. But in September 1399, a second controversial king who had ruled in an autocratic manner, alienating his elites and giving widespread power to a narrow group of resented favourites, was overthrown. Richard II, grandson of Edward III, like Edward II, he had already been forcibly reined in by a tightly knit group of resentful magnates, excluded from power, led by his close relatives, in this case, the Lords Appellant, headed by his uncle, Duke Thomas of Gloucester, and his cousin, Henry of Bolingbroke, Earl of Derby, in 1387. His favourites, like Edward II's in 1308 and 1312, had been targeted by the victorious junta of senior nobles, with his chief ally, Robert de Vere, Earl of Oxford, and recently made Duke of Ireland, having to flee abroad, and his tutor, Sir Simon Burley, being tried by a rigged tribunal and then executed in defiance of the king's pleas. Like Edward II with the Lord Ordinances, the king had resented this humiliation and sought vengeance as soon as practicable, staging a counter coup to restore royal power and subsequently hunting down and murdering one of the most confrontational leaders of the group that had humiliated him. In this case, Duke Thomas. In both cases of royal vengeance, Thomas of Lancaster in 1312 and Thomas of Gloucester in 1397, the victim accused of seeking the king's throne too. Like Edward II in 1322 and Richard in 1397-9, set upon a dangerously narrowly based regime centered on the assertion of untrammeled royal power. Regarded subsequently as tyranny and denounced as such, with execution of a group of its leaders, some by lynch mobs, once it was overthrown. In both cases, relatively minor and obsequiously pro-royal figures within the elite took power under a suspicious, vindictive, and confrontational sovereign. Though in Richard's case, there was a reasonably wide group of royal intimates, nicknamed the Ducati, or the Little Dukes, who held national and regional power, shared out the rewards of lands, offices, and titles, not just the father and son, the dispensers, and their clients as after 1322. In both cases, the sovereign then fell to an invasion masterminded by, or in the name of, their presumed heirs. In Edward II's case, his eldest son was used as a frontman by his alienated wife Isabella and her lover, And in Richard II's case, his cousin, Henry of Bolingbroke, who should have been succeeded his father, John of Gaunt, as Duke of Lancaster in February 1399, but was already in exile and was denied this addition to his prestige and resources by the suspicious Richard. Isabella invaded to prevent her husband's sporadic attempts to divorce her, and Henry invaded to regain his confiscated ducal inheritance and arguably to assure his right of succession in place of his rival contenders, his underage cousin Edmund Mortimer, whose family had been treated by Richard as his heirs earlier in the reign, but were now not so favoured, and his uncle Duke Edmund of York, plus York's son Edward, one of the royal favourites. This is a really, really cool book, and it's worth reading. And it's a lot of fun to read. So as a Christmas book, it's quite cool. Luke Strength, hello. In your past videos and on Armchair Animals, you stated that all the big gun development originated from armored cruisers. Luke Strength, did someone design all big cruisers before the Dreadnought then? I actually covered this the other day when I was talking about when I was doing the Trafalgar to Dreadnought thing. And if I quickly pop up this, and we go that. If you look at HMS Edinburgh, Duke of Edinburgh and class HMS Black Prince, and if you look at the Devonshire class, there is very much a style developing, and this is the case. You want to build a fast battleship, you go to your fast cruisers, your big cruisers, and you take their whole design. As you can see, the guns, yes, she does have secondary guns, but if you look at the layout of the primary guns, it's very similar to the layout as adopted on Dreadnought. Yes, these are single turrets, not double, single gun turrets, not doubles, but there is a lot of similarity going on there. And for more of that, please see the Trafalgar to Dreadnought live, and there's going to be a long patrol, which I'll record tomorrow. Vision, The Economist loves Karl Marx. He was a subscriber and frequent letter to the editor of the newspaper. I think they did agree on the Corn Laws being repealed. Night Ticker, the UK appears to have UCAV studies in the 1970s. Yes. So does everyone. Don't take it the strong way. If you want to look up something called the Queen Bee system from the 1920s. Uncrewed aircraft are not that as new as we like to pretend they are. There is a new book that's banned in Texas Interstate News because it talks about Mexico getting rid of slavery long before the US, and a huge underground railway with script slaves going there. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's banned for that reason, but whatever reason it's banned, it sounds wrong. It's fairly historically accurate from that from the way you're presenting it. Remember, if you watch any movies, which ones? I was watching The Lord of the Rings yesterday. The Twin Towers one. I watch quite a lot of movies when I get a chance. I haven't really gone to the movies in a while. Remember, I can't critique the British celebrating plot to blow up Parliament. We celebrate all manner of insanity, and the French just celebrate a prison break. Alright, so if you did a video on Trafalgar Dreadnought, are you going to do Dreadnought to present? Possibly. But the reason doing 1805 to 1905 is a nice 100-year discrete, and you can bring it from basically going like, this is how we get from Trafalgar to HMS Dreadnought. And that's the point. This is how we get from ships like they are at Trafalgar to HMS Dreadnought. doing it from now, you probably have to do it till Dreadnought to Vanguard. And you probably want to do Vanguard to Queen Elizabeth II, Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, great. That Armored Cruiser to a Dreadnought evolution explanation was most revealing. Thanks. Well, it's a lot of interest. And I said I'm going to do a long patrol and record it on Monday. There might be things added into it as well, but it's going to be a long patrol. So so actually it'll probably be shorter than the live, but it still be a long patrol. It will be a recorded video. So we have Atlantic Linchpin, The Azores in Two World Wars by Guy Warner. Now, this is the book which I've been waiting to come out for a long time. I've heard it was in the works, and it's a really, really interesting book because you can forget how important the Azores are. And the fact he's got David Hobbs to do the introduction is quite cool. But he's also got a foreword by Capitán de Fragata Hugo Miguel Baptista Cabral, a Marina Portuguesa of the Portuguese Navy. And it starts off with this in the foreword. In the summer of 2020, Guy Warner sent to the Portuguese Navy an email requesting more comprehensive information about the participation of naval aviation flying boats in the 1931 Azores revolt. 2 minutes later, Mrs. Isabel Beto, the head of the Portuguese Navy Archives, knowing that I had been researching it, put me in contact with Guy by forwarding his email. Thus, this how easy two aviation history investigators more than 1,000 miles apart can come together in the 21st century. A couple of emails later, Guy kindly sent me a draft of his book about the Azores at war in the 20th century. I was amazed by the richness and thoroughness of his research, but at the same time not surprised by his passion for the Azores, as it takes no more than a visit to those islands to fall in love with them. Nevertheless, despite the quality of his work, something was missing. Actually, something common to most studies about this subject, which is the Portuguese naval aviation role in the Azores, yet Guy was kind enough to change his book and include this last input. Now, the reader has the privilege of having a book that, in very interesting and pleasant style of writing, illustrates from each stakeholder or government viewpoint how the strategic relevance of these islands influence their decisions and actions. Nonetheless, the narrative of this book does not take place only in parliaments or in government offices. The author transports the reader to the places where, at a certain moment, the action is more interesting, be it in the cockpit of a Great War maritime patrol biplane or in a gun battle between a trawler and a U-boat. For the Portuguese, since its discovery back on the 15th century, the Azores has constituted itself a central point for replenishment in the Atlantic. The strategic and military importance of the Azores has always been recognised, but it registered a particular dimension in the two world wars when it became a logistically desirable region for the powerful belligerent nations. This way, from the Portuguese point of view, it was a struggle for sovereignty, trying to use the proper diplomatic tools to preserve national integrity in a fragile balance, since favouring one side could mean invasion by the other. But again, this is also another aspect well covered in the Guy Warner book. This is a wonderful book. It's got absolutely gorgeous pictures in it. It has maps in it. It has detailed writing. It's beautiful appendices of all sorts of details. If you are interested in the Battle Atlantic, this has been the book which has been missing for the Battle Atlantic for a long, long time. And here it is. This is a must-have. If you're interested in Battle Atlantic, if you want to understand what was going on, how it was going on, how it was facilitated, the diplomatic battles going on alongside it, all those complexities, this book. Every single time, this book. It's wonderful to read. Guy has done a wonderful job and has brought together so much information which just wasn't there before. Not in the English language history world. Anyway. Mm-hmm. Let's avoid the critical race theory debate on here. I would say, and this is the thing. This is the thing. I found it. It's going to cause a lot of arguing in the chat and can dominate things. And the thing I think, and this is the only point I'll say on it, is I think the whole symptoms of debate is the fact that there's not been enough conversation. I think the reason you're having this now is because across the world, people have stopped talking to people who they disagree with. They've stopped trying to understand each other, the other side. Too many of us, and this is you can see this problem turns up in history time again. When you start talking to echo chambers, yes, you get a lot of people applauding you and a lot of people agreeing with you, but you don't win over any new people. And it ends up everyone splitting into their own echo chambers, and it's not a good road to go down. It's really not a good road to go down. It can lead to a lot worse. And the first thing I would say about CRT is go and actually read the legal books and the law books which actually go into it. And there are, how do I put this? There is the fully articulated version, which has a lot of merits. And especially in terms of merits for discussion. This is me speaking as a historian. It's something which you should use as a discussion point. Like there are books here which are starting points for discussions of history. They might not be the best books on history. They might not be the all the ones that will settle the world alight, but they are starting points. And it's the same with critical race theory. It's a starting point for a discussion. And the thing you should worry about on both sides of the debate is when they stop the discussion. But also, you need to be able to have a discussion without slagging off each other. Honestly, a discussion where you resort to calling each other names is not good. It means you're not having a discussion. And by the way, the first rule of debate I've always ascribed to is if the only thing I've got left in my arsenal is to call someone a big boogie head or variations of insults, then I've lost the argument. And that's a good point to remember. Colin Cameron. So now we have a book list for our how far into Extra's term will you give us a signed essay summaries? Usually I give them in about the last week in November for submission in February. Professor, I'm reading a translated work right now, and all I can think is what's getting lost in translation. Probably a lot. Depends on the quality of the translator and how much they understand, how familiar they are with history, but also how familiar they are with the two languages and how much they understand the nuance. Because sometimes when you can translate a word literally or spiritually, and sometimes you get a more accurate reading of it if you translate the word spiritually. From 1640. Oh, holy hell. Critical Race is the first thing I hear upon joining the stream. So grateful I know you as well as I do, so I'm comfortable hanging around after hearing that. Thank you, Alex. Yes. Look, the point is about CRT, and this is the other thing, is I'm British. We have our own problems and our own complexities thanks to Empire, so we have our own stuff. And frankly, I would like more people to read CRT in the UK. Because again, I don't agree with everything in it, but I'm a historian. I don't agree with everything and anything. It shouldn't do. No one should agree with everyone 100%. That would make us all cabbages. But you should listen, and you should read, and you should go from there. Whenever I hear people spouting off about it and they haven't actually gone and read it, and I mean actually read the legal books, etc., and about it, not some of the... Because we all know this with history. The amount of newspaper articles which come out which really ruin some history because they aren't properly researched, they aren't fully researched. That's what you have to worry about. And it's the same with CRT. There are some things which are being done in its name which aren't actually in it. And there are some things which are actually, which people probably actually would agree with if they looked at it. Look at it properly. Anyway, finally got to this one. 50 greatest shipwrecks. I was asked about this earlier. Name the 50 greatest shipwrecks. Well, you can imagine my view on this one. I was going, I'm not really sure. I think I can add a few more to that, or I could take that off the list. But it's someone's starting point. And this is a good example of that. This is a discussion book. This is a book which is going to start a discussion. You stick this down in a group of people who like naval history on Christmas, and this will keep them busy for the entire Christmas season. This is your keep everyone talking on something which they won't have an argument about, or they will have an argument, but it'll just be a naval history argument about for Christmas season. How you bring the sides together. Naval history. Have a debate. If they can have an honest debate about that, they can have the bonus about it and anything else. Anyway, this has Mary Rose, an unknown wreck at Alderney, Vassar, Bonhomme Richard, that's the 1779 version, the Waratah, the Titanic, the Empress of Ireland, the Lusitania, the Endurance, the Britannic, the Mendi, the Carpathia, the Egypt, the Morro Castle, the Athenia, the Admiral Graf Spey in 1939, Bismarck, 1941, Ark Royal, 1941, Arizona, Normandy, Yorktown, Edinburgh, Musashi, Tirpitz, Wilfred Gulson, Yamato, U-34, Flying Enterprise, Princess Victoria, Andrea Doria, Pamir, Torrey Canyon, Seawise University, Edmund Fitzgerald, Derbyshire, General Belgrano, Herald of the Free Enterprise, Donna Pez, Mashonas, Oceanus, Rea, Estonia, Akil Laura, Morea Assumpta, Kursk, Lejula, Scylla, Aldana, Costa Concordia, and Unknown Migrant Vessel 2015. The first thing I would say is this. When I read it, I was going, okay, that's very specific list, very modern, mostly 1900 plus. Okay. But it's when you read through it and you go, that's some interesting ideas. The reason they're talking about these are mostly the easy greatest shipwrecks to go and look at. And they're interesting to happen. But no, the Sven Istvan isn't in there. There are lots of shipwrecks not in here. And this is why I think this book is a good Christmas buy. Because it's going to get everyone having a discussion. Everyone having a discussion. And that is what it's for. It's a great starting point. Because you're going to start arguing about it in a case of, no, but I remember this wreck. And there was me sitting there going, but what about all the wrecks from the Battle of Trafalgar or the Battle of Quiberon Bay or the Battle of... There's that going through my head and going, yeah, you can find a lot of that stuff. Mostly it's not really direct. You want to go around, but you can do it. It's cool to start off these things. And this is what this book is for. This is Richard Jones's book to you. That if you have a family who are interested in naval history and you don't want to have political debates all Christmas, which is why what we've discussed just now just came up, is quite good. This will start it off because you just have to turn and go, I'm really surprised this is not in this thing. And they will start talking about it. And they will be going for it. Have a go. Enjoy. Mm-hmm. Coming to 511. Wait, Costa Concordia isn't a shipwreck anymore, right? Didn't they raise her and scrap up? They did. Mm-hmm. So, let's start off with a book which, now the final three I'm into. The United States Tanks and Tank Destroyers of the Second World War by Michael Green. This is going to make a lot of you very, very happy and very interested. Because if you like tanks, you're going to love this book. If you like American tanks, you're going to love this book. If you like a good discussion of these vehicles, you're going to like this book. If you like lots of pictures, you're going to love this book. If you like something which definitely does have as much context and nuance as you can possibly get into it, you're going to love this book. If you again like the models and model making, this book does start you off some very good ideas on how to do that. But before the M4A3E2 tank, the Ordnance Department, in conjunction with the British tank mission to the United States, had given some thought to a heavily armoured infantry support assault tank. An agreement was reached that both American and British industry would build two pilots for testing. The Americans using a much modified first-generation Sherman tank, and the British their Mark 8 cruiser tank. The better performing prototype would go into production. The British Army estimated it would require 8,500 examples of the winning tank. The Ordnance Committee issued the specifications for the American version in May 1942 and designated T-14 assault tank. One and two pilots was available for testing in July of 1942. The second pilot appeared the following month. The pilot tanks referred to pilot tanks featured 101mm, that's 4 inches thick of armor on their glacis, with their CHA turrets ranging in thickness from 76mm to 101mm. Armor on the remainder of the vehicle greatly exceeded that of the standard first-generation Sherman. The weight came in at 47 tons, with the vehicles riding on the early version of the HVSS system using 8 and 6 heavy tank tracks. Testing proved unsatisfactory, with many unresolved design shortcomings. The armored forces had no interest in the concept, and work ground to a halt. Official cancellation didn't occur in December 1944. In March 21st, 1945, report United States versus German equipment is the following quote by Lieutenant General John H. Collier. In my opinion, press reports above statements by high-ranking officers to the effect that we have the best equipment in the world do much to discourage the soldier who is using equipment that he knows to be inferior to that of the enemy. Eisenhower wrote to the Army Chief of Staff, General George C. Marshall, on March 26, 1945, that with the exception of German tanks, only the German bazooka may be considered a superior to an item of ours. In a book titled Move Out, Verify, the combat story of the 743rd Tank Battalion, in a passage describing conversation among the unit's tankers, somebody mentioned that a particular tank general had claimed that the Sherman was better than the German tanks because of speed, maneuverability, and reliability. The answer from another tank president, better hell. The only thing we have over the Germans is that we've got more tanks and build more faster. And that's comfortable thought for a guy with a Mark 6. That's a comfortable thought for a guy when a Mark 6, that's a Tiger, starts shooting at him, isn't it? A buck sergeant continued commenting, I would use diesel engines so that there wouldn't be any high test gasoline and its fumes to make an incendiary bomb out of my buggy tank. There are some gorgeous tanks in here, and it's worth a look. That's good. Have you read Can Openers by Nicholas Moran about tank destroyers? It's in my pile to read. So not yet, no. I was asking, US tank destroyers. M9 half-track with a 3-inch gun used as a tank destroyer. Vision. My grandfather built tanks including the Priest with the big turret replaced by open gun mount. The American locomotive works in Shenry during World War II. Priest was top secret, but they tested the prototype by driving it down State Street in downtown Shenry. Hanok Howard, an armor book not authored by Steve Zaga. Yeah, it's a good one. It's definitely worth a read, and it's definitely pretty interesting, very interesting. The one thing I would say I would have liked them to do is I would have liked some color photos, and I think they could have got some color photos for this. But as it is, they do have a couple, but they're all in the same spot. They're all in sort of one go. There's there, and I'd like more. I'm saying there wasn't any, but I would like more. Because, and I do like the colour, the pictures of the period, and I do understand they're in black and white, and that's fine. But I think if you put, and the reason they've done this is because, and look, we all understand the reason they do this. This paper is far more expensive, and printing color plates is far more expensive than printing black and white. And so they put them in the center of the book, and they're easiest to put there and protect that. But I think having some color books, color pictures alongside black and white would actually make them more stylish and easy to understand, because you learn something more sometimes when you look at it in color. What about Musashi 1944 as a rec? She's on the list. I'd take later on. I had to fix an error. I doubt the designer of HMS Argus for sea that carriers would exceed 100,000 tons. But if the designer of Argus saw in US limits on General Ford, what might it say? Well, seeing as they were converting a liner, they'd probably say, "Ooh, that's what you can build if you're building from scratch." Cool. Taranto by David Hobbs. Yes, this is not exactly a new book, but it's the Naval Air War in the Mediterranean, 1940 to 1945, and it's one of the best books out there. And really, the reason I'm saying it is because it goes with the last book I'm going to do as an excellent juxtaposition. They are both brilliant to read. This one has this. Giulio, north of Littorio, moved under her own power. With the assistance of a tug and grounded in shallow water, about 40 feet deep, 150 yards north of her anchor position. She was tended by small craft and belatedly enclosed by nets. The single hit on the starboard side of Brest number 1, 5.25-inch mount, and mounting blew a hole 36 feet by 23 feet, and caused the flooding of 2 magazines. She was raised and towed to Genoa, where repairs were carried out, which were completed in July 1941. Italian reports also state the bombs that had hit Trento and Libercio failed to explode, a disappointing outcome after the gallantry with which the attacks had been executed. But if this is the case, it is difficult to explain the amount of oil fuel on the surface seen on the reconnaissance photographs taken after the attack. It is possible that the bombs that did not detonate caused some damage in the vicinity of the FFO tanks, which subsequently leaked. In the days after the strike, the Italian battleships that had survived were moved to more northerly bases, away from the focal point of operations in the central Mediterranean and the Greek littoral. The cruiser raid into the Strait of Otranto began as Swordfish attacked Taranto, and also achieved success. The force comprised of the cruisers Orion, Sydney, and Ajax, together with the destroyers Nubian and Mohawk, under Vice Admiral Pridham Whipple. They encountered an Italian convoy at 01:15 hours on 12 November 1940, engaged in minutes later. 4 merchant ships were sunk and their escorts driven off in an action described by Admiral Cunningham as boldly executed operation into narrow waters. Overall, the Italian Navy had suffered a devastating night, and the British fleet returned to Alexandria unscathed at 0700 hours on the 14th of November. It is a very, very good book. FYI, the detailed history of RMS Carpathia could start a spark of political debate. Pretty much most of history can spark a political debate if you give it a chance. And the last book on today's list, and definitely worth a purchase, but especially if you're buying the two together because it gives you a contrast. Task Force 58 by Rod MacDonald. If you buy this with Taranto by the good old David Hobbs, you get something which is pretty darn amazing. You get a very good description of naval aviation in World War II and how it developed and how it progressed, and you get a very balanced approach to both sides. This book is the US Navy's fast carrier strike force that won the war in the Pacific. And, well, this is it. Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, the 12th to the 15th of November, 1942. So, 2 years after Taranto. The final Japanese attempt to reinforce our forces on the 19-mile-long island of Guadalcanal developed into the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, fought between 12th of November and 12th and 15th of November, 1942. The decisive engagement in a series of combined air and sea engagements over 4 days, mostly near Guadalcanal. US intelligence analysis detected the beginning of yet another enemy offensive. Halsey was briefed on 9th of November that it was expected that planes would bomb Guadalcanal on the 11th, and that enemy naval units would bombard Henderson Field on the night of the 12th to destroy Allied aircraft that might attack a subsequent invasion convoy. After a day-long carrier attack on the 13th, troops would land and attempt to retake Henderson Field. A heavily protected Japanese convoy of 11 transports carrying 7,000 troops with 13 destroyer escorts was detected on the 12th of November, running down New Georgia Sound, the slot, closing on the Guadalcanal. A powerful battleship force was present to provide big gun support. As Allied surface forces contacted the inbound Japanese force, Halsey sent Enterprise Task Force 100 miles west of the Solomons axis, with Rear Admiral Ching Lee's fast battleships force taking a parallel course inboard, midway between Enterprise and the Solomons chain. Enterprise planes would strike across the screening battleships. Although not a fast carrier action, Enterprise aircraft shuttling out of Henderson Field helped sink the battleship Huey, the first enemy battleship lost during the war, along with a heavy cruiser, 2 destroyers, and several transports. Although most of the credit goes to Ching Lee, whose 2 fast battleships fought a successful night battleship versus battleship engagement with the Japanese on the 14th and 15th of November. The 4 surviving damaged Japanese troop transports managed to run down to Guadalcanal and beach themselves near Tasforang early on the morning of 15th November, where they were shelled, bombed, and strafed. Only an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 Imperial Japanese Army troops successfully landed, but most of their ammunition had been lost. The Japanese invasion attempt had been thwarted. Both sides subsequently withdrew their carriers and battleships from major operations for a full year, Halsey taking his 2 remaining carriers beyond the range of land-based Japanese aircraft. Both sides had lost many ships during the Guadalcanal operations, so many that Savo Sound, the stretch of water between Guadalcanal and the Florida Islands, came to be known as Iron Bottom Sound by the Allies during the campaign. But despite the losses, the US naval forces had successfully fought off the Japanese naval force, thwarted the naval bombardment, and sunk many of the Japanese troop transports, preventing the planned invasion. The 3-day naval battle of Guadalcanal ended Japan's attempts to retake Guadalcanal, and won Halsey his 4th star. The battle was Japan's last attempt to oust US forces from Guadalcanal and was a decisive strategic victory, pivotal in the outcome of the conflict in the area. But victory in the Guadalcanal campaign had come at a high cost to the Allied naval forces. During the campaign between 7th August 1942 and 8th February 1943, the carriers Hornet and Wasp had been sunk, along with the heavy cruisers Astoria, Chicago, Northampton, Quincy, Vicens, our Royal Australian Navy's Canberra, that's HMAS Canberra, although for some reason this book calls it RAN Canberra, The light cruisers Atlanta and Jania. The destroyers Barton, Benham, Cushing, De Haven, Duncan, Jarvis, Lefray, Meredith, Monson, O'Brien, Porter, Preston, and Walk. Jarvis Murphy. The motor torpedo boats PT 37, 43, 44, 111, 112, and 113. And the transports Colloon, George F. Elliot, Gregory, and Little. And the fleet tug Seminole. The list of Allied naval vessels badly damaged during the campaign was even longer, and including the battleships North Carolina and South Dakota, the carriers Enterprise and Saratoga, and countless heavy and light cruisers, destroyers, and minesweepers and transports. In return, the IJN had lost 2 battleships, 1 light carrier, 3 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, 11 destroyers, 6 submarines, 13 transports, and 5 cargo ships. There's little wonder that Iron Bottom Sound acquired its nickname. It is a very good book. I sometimes wonder how the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm felt about the attack on Toronto and its perceived relationship to the attack on Pearl Harbor. Honestly, they probably aren't that bothered about that one. I appear to have finished my iron brew. That's strange. But I do appear to have finished my iron brew. However, I do have a glass of water here. So I will... This will keep me going till I run out of... Well, till I finish speaking. So I'll probably keep going till about 10 o'clock, which is about another 20 minutes. But I have run out of iron brew, so I'll just answer questions. And it was sort of now till the end. Just look. I'm out of brew. I don't know how that happened. Must have been drinking faster this evening. Put that there. Along with that, because I need it. I'm doing some work on that this week. So many of these books haven't been released yet. Speaking of books that haven't been released yet, when's the latest? It's out on Kindle, but it should be out in January in actual physical copy. It's my book, and most of these books are actually supposed to be released. If they haven't been released, they might have been released in the UK, and in the US they might be on the USNI book. So you might want to check the USNI list. I've done the ones who are in the UK to the Pen and Sword list. It's Pen and Sword what people send them. Vision, House Anthrates in Dune should have read these books. Get everything off the ground that has guns. Yeah, the Dune books are interesting. And the Dune movies are interesting. Iron Brew Bottle Sound. Thank you, Bijon. John Barrow, what do you think of the planned Zhao class heavy cruiser in World Warships? And if it would have been built if allowed? Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. The Zhao class are the tier 10 cruisers. And if I remember correctly, they are based on the Japanese super cruisers, which are what I would call the B-65s. They would have been, if they'd had the time and money, they'd have probably wanted to build them, but I don't think they never actually managed to build them. That's the thing, because there's only so much resources they have. The response would have been interesting, what it would have happened. It's probably a likely response to the Americans would have got, when, of course, the Alaskas. But, if you have them in service, they're interesting. They would probably have ended up working in service action groups, the Yamato and Musashi. That being what they've been for in the end. Senator, how much use would the pre-dreadnoughts have been in World War II? I think the Greeks actually were using a couple of pre-dreadnoughts in World War II, and I seem to remember they were, well, semi-dreadnoughts, and I think they were used for various operations in sort of convoy escort role. So they had a role. Let's be honest, would you want to be a surface raider that would take on a pre-dreadnought? Probably not. But that's the thing. These things are mostly good in certain circumstances. Anak, USN fleet exercise in 1930 successfully attacked Pearl Harbor. They did, many times. If you want to start a Christmas discussion amongst naval historians, just say Graf Spee was a glorified heavy cruiser and see where the right night goes. No, that just tends to end with me winning. I've seen it said the US court got caught in short-termism after 1901. Just how accurate is that? Pretty much, but you have to remember there is two forms of short-termism. There is the short-termism, which is the political economic sort of funding rules system, and there is the short-termism, which is procuring short-termistically. And with the Americans, they were trying long-term procurements based on short-termist thinkings. The LCS is a classic example of that. There is a very limited period in time when the LCS makes sense in any way, shape, or form as a concept. And you have it now, and it's up the case to try and make it more viable. And honestly, I could see it being used for various things in wartime, but I can see it mostly being used as something which is there. Knights of Cameroon, why did Italy still have ironclads as late World War One? Because why get rid of them? You're building up your navy. If you get rid of ships, all you have to do is then get rid of officers and sailors. If you want to build up your navy, you tend to keep the older ships in commission until you've got replacements for them, because that allows you to grow the crews. Because no one's going to pay sailors to sit around shore and do nothing. And it also, that stops you getting sea experience for your sailors and your officers. Better to keep them in a ironclad going backwards and forwards and doing something than doing nothing. And look, USN fleet exercise in 1935 successfully attacked Pearl Harbor. Yeah. And Royal Navy exercise in the Mediterranean in 1920 successfully attacked Malta. They also successfully attacked Gibraltar and Alexandria. And at one point, they successfully attacked Portsmouth. And there was another exercise which is rumoured that a submarine managed to sneak into Scapa Flow. Successful exercises are sometimes treated as just that. There's a successful exercise. What was the discussion and context of the exercise? What were the rules set up? How did things turn out? And that might be how the things are taken into account. Even Austria and Hungary hanged them around too. Yeah. The Battle of Lisa fame, SMS Kaiser was still around. Well, yes, but the Lucen, as it was then, was no one to get rid of because it was, a famous ship. Vision, if the USN had a warrior or devastation, both heavily upgraded, would they still likely have been serving World War I with triple expansion and RF or 6-inch guns? Probably not warrior, maybe a devastation. Barbarossa, the American Civil War had all manner of riverine warfare, but I haven't seen it anywhere else. Any books? John Keegan's got his book on the American Civil War here. I know I think he's done another book on the battles on the rivers and lakes of the American Civil War, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know why I think that is, but I think it is. 9681. No, the whole point of having the LCS competition was that we were going to pick the better one. If you can't pick a better one, that suggests they're both equally bad. Any suggestions on history of Royal Navy pension system? You're probably going to want to contact Samuel McLean, at Canadian Errant, on Twitter and ask him because he'll know better than me. I don't think the Royal Navy ever really paid into created tontines. As far as I know, I don't think they ever did that one, but I'm not 100% sure because there is. It depends when you start up the Royal Navy and when you consider the various things. Tontines don't seem to be part of the Royal Navy's history, though, really, as a rule. Although a lot of Freemasons use them, and so maybe you're looking at, if you're talking about some of the stuff in Henry VIII's time, maybe, but I don't think so. That's good. That's during wartime, not in peacetime. In peacetime, their ships tend to be out there having to move around. In wartime, well, as happened with the Franco-Spanish fleet, they get sitting in port a lot. No, LCS don't. Oh, sorry, I meant riverine warfare and other conflicts. No, there isn't really a good book about riverine warfare in general conflicts. In wider conflicts. It's one of those things which isn't studied. There is one which is on Vietnam, but I cannot remember where it is. But it's somewhere. Sometimes, are there any Navy themed puzzles you'd recommend? Not really. Not really. I tend to enjoy playing Battleship, but that's about the closest you get to a puzzle. There's some puzzles based on various paintings of naval actions. The Fighting Temeraire one is a good one, but that's a 10,000 piece puzzle, and it took my mum all of 4.5 hours to put together. I think. I know she did it in an afternoon. My mum's more a puzzle person than me. LED. Right. River warfare in China, 1946-48, would be a great subject. It would be a very interesting subject, but trying to get decent sources on it would be very, very interesting. Alright, someone was... No, well, that's it. Right. John Shay, can you say it again on Vietnam? Your voice went nuts for a second. I have no idea why. But there is a good book on Vietnam, on the amphibious sport, on the riverine battles. I just don't have any idea where I have it. It might have been that I turned my head away from the microphone. I do apologize. Otherwise, I forget. When I'm staring up at my bookshelf up there, the microphone's here, and I'm facing away from it, so I apologize. No, I kind of want to go into a Navy-themed escape room. Just apply for Navy training. 1963. Well, if no HDs are to replace the two Albion LPDs, then what is replacing the Bay class LSDs? There, because they're landing ship docks. Actually, they're landing ship logistics docks. Probably more a variation on a continuation of the Bay class. Probably something similar to that, with possibly a more general purpose role. I have a feeling I can hear a fluffy. Hello. Hello, I hear you. Hello. You wanted to come in and say hi, do you? It's very fun, did you? Okay, come on. In you come. Hello, Mighty Fluff. You come on. Say hi to her. We haven't had bombardment this evening, have we? That made you happier. Hello, everyone. Let's see. So... Rapper Razorback, you enjoy criticism of the Imperial Star Destroyers in Star Wars. When, for the purpose of balance, are you going after Star Trek? I'm planning on probably doing that over Christmas. I'm thinking of doing one for Christmas on Star Trek and ship design in Star Trek. If the book I've ordered on Star Trek ships actually arrives. That's the thing. The books on the others have arrived, so I can talk about Star Wars. The books are the books for Star Trek haven't arrived. I almost wonder if they're trying to keep them away from me because they don't want me to start talking about how terrible their ships are. You're good, Bush. Yes, you are. Hello. Don't eat my ear, please. I like it. Hello. Oh, good lord. Hello. I'm being mugged by a trading assistant, a fluffy research assistant. Hello. Oh, yes, you good. Yes. When I finish, I'll take you back in. Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Hello. Oh, good lord. Yes, you're adoring. Yes, you're lovely. Yes. But that's my ear. I like it attached. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Okay. Does does the US need the Jackie Fisher to come in and pull? Oh, hey. Ear and nose are like attached. They're not for chewing.
You need it rescuing.
Yes, I do. He's decided I'm edible.
He's hungry.
You brought him out in. Have you given him dinner?
He's had dinner. Sorry. He saw the other fluff was eating his dinner, and it's obviously made him hungry.
Yes, for Papa's blood. Hey! That's attached. Ow, that's attached too.
Not kisses.
Yes, they're not kisses. He's actually biting the nose.
He obviously thinks you need a bath.
Oh. Hello. All right, go boy. Good boy. Go on. Go with Sissy. Go on. Oh, you want to say hello to everyone again?
Hello. Hello, everyone. Hope you're well. Hope you enjoyed the Christmas books.
Right. Hello. Go on.
Hello. Bash your head.
Yes. Hello. Yes, you're gorgeous. You made the mistake of allowing up. Now you get the full puppy. Yes. I'm pretty well. Well, I did manage to catch some of this today. I'm glad you did. Colin Cameron, given we have the Great Eastern Warrior, Caroline, Belfast, Britannia Alliance, do you think we have an example of all the major propulsion since we moved from sails and museum ships? Most of them. There are some some of the minor ones missing. Seneca, local naval historian, gets brutally mauled by his corgi. Close. Oh, I'm sorry, Rapid Raceback, about your philosophy research assistant passing away. It's always good to have them come visit, but yeah. Definitely a stuff he's saying hello. Student, if nuclear subs proliferate after AUKUS, which is more likely? RN sales of reactor hulls or French sales the same to interested parties like Japan, Republic of Korea, or elsewhere? Probably RN. Because the trouble is, if you go with the lower enriched unit fuel sort of route, you then have to refuel and set up scenarios to refuel your submarines. Honestly, Japan could probably build their own. Sorry, they do have the technology. They could build their own. I'm burping a bit. But the RN, if you buy the higher enriched uranium, then you don't have to have refuel during its life. But the trouble is, there are limited stockpiles of that, and there are limited stockpiles. So this is one of the things which is often not forgotten. There are limited stockpiles of it, and we would actually need to start enriching more uranium to build up the stockpiles to actually keep up production. If we did this. John Famara, Star Trek it's a good series book. I know. I do have a couple of them. They might be enough for me to do it, but I wanted. There's another bigger book which is I was hoping to get, but I haven't managed to get hold of. Right, everyone. Thank you very much. As you know, I'm out of Iron Brew now, and I'm out of water. And I have just been mauled by a corgi. So I'm going to say thank you very much, everyone. I hope you've had a nice evening. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you for watching. And of course, Biden's apologizing to French. Everyone's trying to work out what's going to make Macron stop being such a about it. Oh, who knows? We'll figure it out at some point. But at the moment, it's an election year for the French, and you have to always remember in election year, people blow stuff up. I don't think Japan is looking at nuclear submarines at the moment. So, night. Thank you. Colin Basava, Rapper Razak, thank you, GG40, Bijon, Abzaski. Take care, Night6831. Thank you, M35 Benvids. Thank you, Howard King. Thank you, Scorpion26511. And thank you, Paul Johnson. Thank you very much. I hope everyone's had a good time. And thank you very much. Take care. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Melanie1640. Thank you, Anuk. Thank you, everyone who's liked and subscribed. I still have the bet going with my aunt. Thank you, Jonathan Burrow. And thank you, Juicy Fusion. And thank you, Carmen Gasberg. And thank you, Jess P. And thank you, everyone else. Thank you. Take care. And, well, have a nice evening. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Steph Thompson. And thank you, Dutch Squad. Thank you, everyone. Take care.